Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive in Network Assessments by EC Console. This is Section 3, Hands-on with Network Assessments. In this video, we'll take a look at the learning objectives for this section. So let's dive on in. In this section, we'll be doing a lot of hands-on and practical work. We'll start off by learning how to perform network enumeration. We'll take a look at working with various open source intelligence techniques and tools. You'll also learn how to perform both network and port scanning using popular network scanning tools. We'll also take a look at exploring ICMP probing techniques for systems that may have ICMP responses disabled. Furthermore, you'll gain an understanding on common evasion techniques which are used by cybersecurity professionals such as ethical hackers and penetration testers. And lastly, you will learn how to assess remote information services which are found on a network. In the next video, we'll take a dive into understanding how to perform network enumeration. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is Section 3, Hands-on with Network Assessment. In this video, you will learn how to perform network enumeration. So let's dive on in. Network enumeration simply allows cybersecurity professionals, such as ethical hackers, security researchers, even network security professionals, and penetration testers, to identify whether a threat actor is able to extract sensitive information from a host machine. Many host machines can leak various important details, such as the ARP cache, the routing tables, usernames, password policies, network, and even shared drive information. Therefore, it's really important to identify these security vulnerabilities quickly and implement countermeasures. So let's take a dive in using Kali Linux and identify, by using tools and techniques, any sort of data leakage by performing network enumeration. To get started, let's open our terminal. So we can start by checking our IP address, and our network as usual could do IP-ADDR. And as you can see, I'm on the ETH1 adapter and my network is 172.1.0/24. .20 simply represents my IP address. To get started, let's actually do a simple nmap scan. You could do sudo nmap-s, capital C, and this will perform a basic script scan that will do some network enumeration for us on a target or all devices on our network. Next, we can type our target network, which is .30.1.0/24. But to be specific, I could scan a specific host on my network. Gonna hit enter. It's asking for my Kali password. Gonna enter it one more time. Hit enter. And now we wait a couple of seconds. What this will do is identify common network services and perform basic network enumeration on each of these services. So for example, if it detects, let's say, FTP, File Transfer Protocol, it will try to get the information such as, let's say, for example, whether it was able to log in anonymously, gain the banner information, and so on. Furthermore, if it detects SMB, server message block, we'll try to enumerate the version, whether it has any sort of security, whether Nmap is able to determine if anonymous login is available or not. So I'm going to pause the video, and when this is completed, we will resume. So the scan took a couple of minutes to complete, and this here's the results. So we can see that FTP is open, is able to identify the FTP system is a Windows NT-based operating system. We have the SSH host keys, but these are just simply public information. We also see port 80 is open for HTTP. The HTTP method at risk is trace, so there may be some potential issues here. Scroll down further, it detects MySQL is running, so which means to say that there's a MySQL database on this target system. It's able to enumerate certain flags, certain capabilities, which may allow a threat actor to extract information as well. Going down further, let's see what we get. We have some additional services, organization name, but look at this. Under the host script results, we get a lot of awesome details. We get the NetBIOS name, which is pretty much a computer name. We get the MAC address, which is expected. We get the operating system version, source pack level. The type of operating system to be really specific, Microsoft Windows Server 2008, source pack 1. It's on a work group, not a domain. We even get a SMB security modes, which is super amazing. We also get a SMB security mode version as well too. And we could determine that message sign-in it's actually enabled but not required. So which means to say we may be able to extract, well, to put simply, we may be able to actually view the contents of the network shares and perhaps download content and even upload content to this target system. So let's imagine that you simply want to determine the SMB security mode without having to run all the scripts. We can use the Nmap scripting engine, and all we need to do is say nmap -- script and specify the scripts that we want to use. So for example, we can say SMB -security -mode and then specify our target. So in my lab, it's 172.31.21. And remember, only perform these scans on systems that you own and that you have legal permission to do so. So I'm going to hit enter, and this should take a few seconds to complete. And currently we have a problem. It's saying that, okay, this system seems to be down. Try using -pn. So let's try that parameter. And currently it's detecting that all the ports are filtered, which is pretty strange actually. So if you see all ports are filtered, it simply means that there's some type of firewall on the actual target device. Alright, so I'm going to try this one more time, and let's see if it works. Okay, this time it actually worked. So it did not give us the actual security mode that we were looking for. However, if we had done the regular one, which is -S C, we actually got a security mode, which is kind of strange actually. But that's okay. At least we got it from using -S C. Another technique we could use is try to actually enumerate the user shares. So let's do sudo nmap -- then smb -enum -shares and specify a target once more. And this should take a few minutes to actually complete. Oh, actually finished up very, very fast. So we got all the ports that is open as expected. And look at this, so it actually shows all the shares that are available on the system. So there's an admin $, there's a C $, there's an IPC shares. However, take a look at their status. So these are access denied, anonymous access is none, but this particular share says read. So which means to say we may be able to actually read information from this particular share. During the course of this video, you take a look at understanding the concepts of performing enumeration, and you have also seen how to use various tools and techniques to perform enumeration on a host within a network. In the next video, we'll take a look at working with open source intelligence for gathering information using passive techniques. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessments by AC Console. This is Section 3, Hands-on with Network Assessments. In this section, you will learn about working with open source intelligence tools, and you'll also discover on how to gather information about a target. So let's dive on in. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is OSINT, or open source intelligence? To put simply, this is a technique of passively gathering publicly available information about a target. So you're probably wondering, what do we mean by passively gathering? The first phase in penetration testing, ethical hacking, or even hacking generally, it's information gathering or reconnaissance. There's two types of information gathering or reconnaissance, and this is active, and the other one is called passive. Passive simply uses an indirect approach to gather information about the target without, how to say, directly engaging the target. So in other words, we are using publicly accessible information to help profile and understand what vulnerabilities exist within our target itself. The thing is, many organizations usually leak and they also post too much information about themselves on various platforms such as forums, blogs, and even social media. A threat actor, whether it's a penetration tester or a real hacker, can simply collect all of this information, analyze the information, and even use the information against the actual target. To put simply, to get started with performing open source intelligence, we can use these following points as guidelines. We can simply start by checking search engines such as Yahoo, Bing, Google, and any other search engines out there about our target. So, to put simply, we can just go on Google and search for our target organization and see what the search results reveal to us. We can even perform Google hacking techniques, or what some persons might call Google dorking, which is pretty much using advanced Google searches to look for specific information about a target. We can even check social media platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, even Twitter for anyone who may post pictures, such as, let's say, an employee of the organization, and sometimes employees will take pictures of their desk, and on their desk may have, let's say, their employee's ID badge or even sensitive information written on a post-it note. We can also look at footprinting a company's website. We can even look at profiling email footprinting techniques, using Whois information to gather domain registry, and even performing DNS footprinting. So let's take a deep dive into understanding how to use each of these techniques to actually gather information about your target. Here I'm on Google and I could simply search for Whois, and this will list a number of Whois databases. A Whois database usually contains the registration information about a domain. So we can check a few of these. We can even do an icon Whois lookup. We could check whois.domains.tools, and let's click on any of these. So we can start with this one here. And we can simply enter a domain. So let's say, for example, we enter Microsoft.com and hit search. This is going to, of course, is going to ask me if I'm a robot or not. And let's hit go. And now we actually got the Whois information for Microsoft. So we can see the domain registration information, such as when the domain was registered, when it's going to expire, when it was last updated. We can even get the name servers. We can even get any sort of technical contact information. Also their autonomous system number, such as the ISP, their public internet address, and any other meaningful information. However, down here will reveal any sort of confidential information. There are some organizations who register a domain and does not pay for privacy. If they do not pay for privacy, then we'll see all their registration information publicly available in this portion of the Whois record. However, keep in mind that most organizations, if not all already, pay for privacy so that their personal or their private information is not leaked outside. So this here is one technique of where we could actually get information about a domain or the owner of the domain. Another place we can check is job websites. So let's head over to Indeed and let's search for something. Let's search for network administrator and let's see what pops up. So let's hit search, and guys, by no means I'm targeting any particular organization. We are just taking a look at publicly available information and trying to understand how a threat actor could leverage this information to target a particular organization. So let's click on the first one, Network and Systems Administrator. And what we are looking for is whether the organization lists any specific technologies. And look at this, experience in the following, but it's not required. So there are some Dell EMC systems, there are some Mitel phone systems, there's a backup exec solution, there's even this, there's some VMware, there's some Windows Server, some Unix systems, and apparently this company is using some Dell networking technologies. So as a threat actor, even though I'm seeing this as, let's say, a job vacancy, what I'm also seeing here is a type of technologies this company is using. So, for example, their voice over IP system is Mitel. So this means to say a threat actor can simply look for vulnerabilities and even exploits for Mitel-based systems. In terms of networking, we can see that they are using Dell networking solutions. Now, I'm not too sure whether it's switches, routers, or some other solution as well. However, what they identify is the actual vendor here. So just by looking at this specific information, we can determine the type of technology and IT or network infrastructure within the internal side of this organization. So as you can see, this is a pretty good example of how you can use publicly available information which may be leaked a little too much out there, and threat actors can simply leverage this to their advantage. However, on the organization standpoint, they are looking for someone who has these skills or experience within these technologies. Sometimes revealing certain technologies may be a bad thing and also a good thing, so just be mindful about that. Another place we can check for organization information is a site called hunter.io. So Hunter.io is going to provide a lot of publicly available information about employees who belong to a certain organization. It's recommended to create an account on Hunter.io before you perform your searches, because your searches will be limited. However, if you want to get additional features on Hunter.io, you will need a paid account. So just give me 1 second. I'm just going to log in and then we'll perform a simple search. All right, so now I'm back logged in, and yes, the interface looks a little bit different, but on the main search itself, I could begin by typing an organization. So if I type, let's say for example, Microsoft, and while I'm typing Microsoft, it's giving me certain potential domains. So let's say for example, I'm looking for Microsoft.com, we can see it's load up Microsoft.com. I can simply click it, and there are over 34,000 results. Simply by clicking this, I can get persons who perhaps worked in this organization before or is currently working within this organization. And check this out, it actually shows the most common format for their emails. So if it is this organization is using their, let's say, the username portion of their email address to also log into their network, then Hunter.io is actually showing me their email format structure and possible username structure as well, structures in their format. Now look at some of these. We can see person's name, we can see their email addresses, we can see even the sources of where this information was captured from. So if a person had entered, let's say, their email address, their contact information, and let's say it's somewhat linked to their organization in some public or external, probably third-party forum, it's going to pop up here. Now, the cool thing is that we can see some of their job titles. So let's say, for example, a threat actor is actually targeting a high-profile employee, such as, let's say, a board of director, perhaps a CEO, perhaps even, let's say, a director. Well, it makes it easy to actually identify the high-profile employees of an organization if you should perform, let's say, some type of spear phishing attack or even a whaling attack. Going on further here, we can see that the result is limited and definitely you will need a paid account to see more results. However, the cool thing is we can click on these where it says sources, and we can see the actual sources of where the information was captured from. Furthermore, we can use a people finder, so we could search for a person and enter the organization to verify whether the person actually works in that institution or organization, and whether there is also any sort of additional information that may lead to verify the person is working in that company. Another great place we can check is called Shodan. Shodan is pretty much a search engine for devices which are on the internet. So in other words, it's a search engine for IoT devices, and it's really, really powerful actually. We can find a lot of devices that perhaps belongs to various companies. We can look for vulnerabilities. We can even see things that we think that no one else sees when we connect a device to a network. To leverage a Power Showdown, you will definitely need an account. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to log into my account here. Okay, so now I have been logged into my account. What I'm going to do is, let's say for example, I search for Windows Server and hit enter for search. And this is going to show me all the Windows Server around the world. Now, this is not every Windows Server, but all the Windows servers that it has detected around the world to be directly connected to the internet. So currently we can see that there are above 2 million devices that returned as a result for Windows Server. We can see the amount in various countries, we can see various service ports open, we can see top organization, we can even see products, and we can even filter out based on certain versions of Windows Server. For example, right now Microsoft is using Windows Server 2019, and I think that there's a newer version that's going to release sometime soon if it's not already released. But there's a lot of organizations and even users around the world who's using a much more older version of Windows Server. For example, there's Windows Server 2008, 2012 as well. So let's say, for example, I click this here. What this will do now, it will filter the results for me and show me a very specific result for Windows Server 2008 R2 Enterprise. Now, the thing about being a penetration tester and also an ethical hacker is you need to look for vulnerabilities based on your target operating system. And sometimes, if you are attacking a system from across the internet, you'll need to look for something called the lowest hanging fruits. The lowest hanging fruits are pretty much the systems which are very easy to break into because the vulnerabilities are very widely known and perhaps the organization did not patch those vulnerabilities. The cool thing is, if we click on one of these, we'll get much more specific information about the actual server. Now, keep in mind that we are not hacking anyone right now. We are not targeting any particular organization or any users around the world. What Shodan is showing us is publicly available information that anyone around the world can see. So, for example, let's say I click on this first organization here. Simply by clicking the IP, we can get more additional information and we can see all the open ports. These ports are service ports, and as you know, a service port simply is open to accept an incoming message or to send a message. And if a port is open on, let's say, a server, it simply means that this server is running specific services or applications which require these ports to open. The cool thing about Shodan is it will show you a little description about each of these ports as we go down further and shows us the banner information as well. Furthermore, sometimes that when you click on, let's say, public IP or within a result inside of Shodan, it will show you known vulnerabilities as well. Some of the most scarier things is if we click on images, it will show us, let's say, for example, if you click on images, here, this should take a few seconds to load up, but to put simply, what it's going to show us is all the logins, or like a login screen of a Windows Server machine. So as we can see, these are the actual screenshots that were taken by Shodan. Again, this is publicly available information. So please don't use this information for anything malicious or any sort of thing that may carry you to any sort of legal problems. Another site worth mentioning is called Census. Census requires to have a user account to actually leverage a power or Census. Census is sort of like Shodan. It gives you additional information about IPs that you may insert into Census. Another cool site we can check let's say, the web application of a target web server is called Netgraph. Netcraft simply identify the running applications, services, and technologies of a target web server. Simply head over to the Netcraft website, which is netcraft.com, and what we are looking for is a very special box that says, what's that site running? So you can simply enter a domain such as, let's say, https://www.microsoft.com, and we can simply hit this little icon here to begin our search. And this is going to return the results for all the technologies that this web server is actually running. So right now it's currently, well, it has now finished analyze the website, and you can see here the first date it was seen, the primary language. We can see the site owner, where the site is located, where it's hosted, public IP v4, public IP v6, domain information, register information as well. We can see IP addresses, descriptions. We can even get a geographic location as well based on the IP addresses that were used on the server. We can get the SSL TLS information for its data encryption that provides between the web browser and the web server. The certificate information, we can even see that Netcraft is trying to determine whether the web application, whether it's vulnerable to the Poodle attack, whether it's vulnerable to the Heartbleed attack. We can see the hosting information as well, so we can see where it was hosted over a period of time, their public IPs, the systems that were hosting the web application. In this case, you can see it's Linux that is hosting the web application, but we are not able to see the actual web application platform itself. We have the sender policy, the DMARC, additional technologies that are being used within the web application and the web server as well. Such information will be very useful to a threat actor because the threat actor can now look for any sort of vulnerabilities within these web applications and try to attempt to exploit it. Additionally, we can even try to perform DNS enumeration on our target. So we can begin by, let's say, opening our command prompt in Windows, and we can use the NS lookup tool. So we can simply type NS lookup and press enter. Oops, I spelled it wrong. So NS lookup, hit enter, and it's going to return your DNS server that you're using. So I'm currently using Cloudflare, public DNS server. So I could change this to query, let's say, for example, Google public DNS server, which is 8888. Hit enter now, and this is going to query, well, it's going to send all these queries now to Google DNS server. So for example, if I use, let's say, set type equal A, and let's say I search for www.microsoft.com, this is going to return the DNS A record for me of this web server. So in other words, it's going to give me the IPv4 address of this web server. Additionally, I can do set type equal MX, and MX specifies the mail exchange servers. So now I can specify the domain only, which is microsoft.com. Hit enter, and right here we actually get the email server for the microsoft.com domain. Furthermore, we can specify the all, so we could say set type equal all, and this should give me all the records for a particular domain. So let's search back for microsoft.com, hit enter, and this should take, oops, and it's actually finished already. So let's scroll up, and here we can see all the internet addresses, their name servers. We can see their public name server, the primary name servers. We can see any sort of additional DNS records that they may have entered on their DNS server that's publicly available to anyone on the internet. Additionally, we can use various tools within Kali Linux to help us perform DNS enumeration. So to do this, let's click on the Kali icon here, click on information gathering, and we can see that there's DNS analysis. Let's click on that, and let's select the DNS enum tool. So just by opening the application, we can see a lot of options that are available. So to get started, let me clear the screen so we can see this a bit more clear. And to actually perform a DNS enumeration on, let's say, target, we can use the command DNS enum, like so. Use -d to specify a domain, and then we can specify a domain name, which is Microsoft. And just hit enter, and apparently I'm missing something. So let's see what I'm missing. So DNS enum, oh, and I need to specify the options. So I can specify a DNS server to actually use, and let me do just that. And I'm going to specify Google DNS server space and the URL, and look at the results that are coming back in. So simply by using DNS enum, we specify the DNS server command together with the DNS server that we want to use as our query, and then our domain. And within a few seconds, it was able to actually perform the query to Google DNS server to retrieve all of these records for us. The A records, or pretty much the host addresses, are simply the public IP addresses that are assigned to the domains. We can see the name servers that are also associated with the domain. We can also see the mail servers, and currently detected too. And we can see, even though the host names look really similar, but it's actually two different IP addresses. Furthermore, the tool will attempt to perform zone transfer, which is a vulnerability which allows a threat actor to retrieve various zone records from a target DNS server, and these zone records may contain, let's say, confidential or private information that is regarding to assets, networks, even hosts, or on the internal side of an organization network. In this video, you take a look at understanding the fundamentals of OSINT, which is open source intelligence, and you have gained a hands-on experience on performing open source intelligence using popular tools. In the next video, we'll take a look at performing network and port scanning. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive in network assessments by EC Council. This is Section 3, Hands-on with Network Assessment. In this video, you will learn how to perform network and port scanning. So let's dive on in. So what exactly is scanning? To put simply, scanning simply allows a cybersecurity professional to discover live hosts or live systems or devices on a network. It also helps to identify or profile the identity of the operating system, running services, and even open ports on host devices. Furthermore, it can also help you to identify any unauthorized devices that may be connected to your network. So let's dive in to get a better understanding on how to perform network scanning and discovering open ports and running services. So log into Kali Linux and let's click on the terminal. I'm going to make it a little bigger so we can see a bit more properly. All right, one of the first things that we want to do is to perform passive information gathering. But just before we do that, let's check to see what's our IP address on our network. You can simply do ifconfig and hit enter, and this will show you all your network adapters and the IP address on that particular adapter. For the network that I'm connected on, I'm actually using ETH, which is Ethernet 1 interface, and this is a network that I'm connected to right now. The other interfaces does not have any IP addresses because those interfaces are disabled. Another technique is you can use IPADDR and press enter, and this will give you a summary of all your interfaces and their corresponding IP address. So as you can see, for ETH is 1, it's 172.30.1.20/24. So let's actually begin by let's begin by performing passive scanning. We can use a tool such as NetDiscover. NetDiscover will simply listen for any sort of ARP packets or ARP messages And as you know that ARP, Address Resolution Protocol, will contain IP addresses and their corresponding MAC address. So to perform this task, we can use sudo net discover -r and specify our network ID, which is 172.30.1.0/24, and hit enter. If it asks for your password, simply enter the password that you use to log into Kali Linux and hit enter once more. And I typed my password wrong, gonna type it one more time. And this tool will take perhaps a few seconds to a couple of minutes to actually show the results. So now the results are back, we can simply see that there are 3 devices connected. There's a .1, which is most likely the default gateway. There's .21, there's also .23. We also got their MAC addresses and also their vendor type. So without even sending probes on the network, our system simply listened for probes, which is pretty cool actually. Because this is a technique of passive scanning. We don't rely on sending probes, but we patiently wait for other systems to send ARP messages across our local area network. There's another way we can perform scanning as well to quickly identify, let's say, host systems on a network. And before we do this, let's just get our IP address once more. And our IP is 172.30.1.20. So let's copy this. And what we can do, we can use nmap now. So nmap-sn to perform a ping scan. And let's perform a ping scan on our network. However, let's exclude our IP address. So you can do --exclude and simply specify the IP address of your attacker machine. Hit enter, and this will perform a ping sweep or a ping scan across the network. So in other words, our attacker machine is using nmap to send ICMP messages across the entire subnet, and devices that responds to our machine, it will appear in the scan result. So as we can see, 172.30.1.21 responded, and also 172.30.1.23 responded. So to be more specific, we actually have 2 active systems on our network with the exclusion of our attacker system. So let's say we take one of these systems to be, let's say our target. So let's copy this one, and I'm just going to use .21 as an example. So to perform a port scan on a target, we can use nmap and specify the IP address of our target. What this scan will do, it will scan the top 1000 ports of this target system and provide the results to it. It will provide results to us. So to put simply, we can see a number of ports open, and the thing about this scan is this scan uses TCP connections by default and not scan for UDP ports. So all the ports that we will see in the scan are TCP based. We can see the state is open, and we can see the service that is associated with a particular port. For example, there's port 22 open. This is a TCP port, and it's running the SSH service. Another example is we can see port 3306 open, a TCP port, and it's using MySQL. Furthermore, if you want to get more specific information, we can simply use a -a parameter, and -a will allow us to perform a port scan. It will also help us identify the operating system of our target. It will also do service version enumeration, well, basic enumeration that is, and it will perform basic script scanning. So let's hit enter on this, and we'll take a look at the results once it's completed. So now the scan is complete, let's take a look at analyzing the actual results. So before we only had the port number, the port type, whether it's TCP or UDP, the port state, and the service. However, we actually get the service version. So you can see here for port 21, it's running FTP, but specifically Microsoft FTPD. You'll notice here that under the indentation aspect or the indentation area, it tries to do banner grabbing to give us more specific information about the service running. For example, we can see SSH, but it's running OpenSSH 7.1 and the protocol version is 2.0, and we have the SSH public keys. For the web service, which is on port 80, of course it's running HTTP, but in this case it's using Microsoft IIS HTTPD 7.5, and it provides some of the HTTP header information for us. Scrolling down even further, we'll get additional information such as service version for each particular service and open port that Nmap is able to identify. But keep in mind that the default Nmap scan will perform a scan only on the top 1000 ports. Going on further here, it is able to perform basic script scanning to help identify the target operating system. So without even knowing the target operating system prior to the scan, Nmap is able to help us identify the target. So we got the NetBIOS name. We can see this here is the name of the system, which is Vagrant 2008 R2. We can get the MAC address. It's running in VirtualBox. So it detected a MAC address, which is the first 24 bits of the MAC address to be identified as a VirtualBox virtual network interface card. So we know this is within a virtual machine. Furthermore, it is able to do SMB OS discovery to help profile the operating system. So we can see here the OS, it says Windows Server 2008 R2 standard. We have the build number, which is 7601, and it's running Service Pack 1. So this means as a threat actor, or let's say an ethical hacker, or even a penetration tester, we'll be able to look for vulnerabilities on the internet by doing additional research to actually identify whether there's any sort of known vulnerabilities and what type of exploits may be best suited to take advantage of those security weaknesses. Furthermore, we can see down here where it says computer name, NetBIOS name, and workgroup, what is connected to a domain or a workgroup. So simply by showing it's a workgroup, it is independent. It's not connected to a Windows Active Directory domain. We can see the system uptime. We can see whether there's any sort of SMB file shares. And SMB, which is server message block, is used to provide file and sharing services across a TCP/IP network. We can also see the SMB mode and additional details as well here. Having completed this section, you have learned the importance of performing network scanning, and you have also learned how to use Nmap and also NetDiscover to perform both passive and active scanning of a target. You have also learned how to profile a target, identify its operating system, and any services and their service versions that may be running on the target device. In the next video, we'll take a look at exploring various ICMP probing techniques. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is Section 3, Hands-on with Network Assessments. In this video, we'll be exploring various ICMP probing techniques. So without further ado, let's dive into our Kali Linux machine to get a better understanding on how we could use Nmap to perform, of course, various ICMP probing techniques against a target. So currently, we are on Kali Linux. Let's open our terminal, and I'm just going to make this a little bigger for you to see. And there we go. So whenever we are connected to a network, one of the first things we want to do is an IPADDR command to verify what network we are connected to. So for example, on my Ethernet 1 interface, I'm connected to the 172.1.0/24 network. However, the 20 is my actual IP address. So let's actually determine the number of devices which are currently on my network. Going to type clear, going to use Nmap, then specify my network, which is 172.1.0/24. Go ahead and enter now. What is going to happen here is Nmap is going to scan my entire network, show me all the devices which are online, and determine which ports are open, which ports are closed, and they are running services. The thing about using Nmap and let me scroll up just a little bit. When you use Nmap as it is, Nmap will perform a ping to all devices within a subnet. If a device responds, then it will perform a scan on that specific device. For example, we can see that 172.1.21 is online, which means to say that .21 responded to our ICMP or our ping message from Nmap. Then Nmap checked the top 1000 ports on this target, determine which ports are open and which ports are closed. However, by default, whenever Nmap performs a scan, Nmap will definitely send a ping. However, there are various ping options available when using Nmap. To see these options, we can simply type Nmap and hit enter once. And here we have a lot of other options available where we can use within Nmap. So starting from the top, we have some various examples. We have host discovery, but take a look at this. We have various ICMP echo to get a timestamp and netmask request discovery probes. We can even try out a couple of these. But just as an additional piece of information, you can see all the different parameters that can be used with Nmap by simply typing Nmap and pressing enter, and you'll see all the options available. So let's take a look at the first ICMP echo ping. To perform this, we can say Nmap, then we can do dash capital P, capital E, then specify either the entire network range, or we can specify a particular host. So let's do 21 and hit enter. With this, it actually performs an ICMP echo ping on this specific device only. The cool thing, it performs a general ping, and if the device responds, which is the 21, then Nmap will actually perform a scan on this host. So as you can see, the scan is really basic, and we still get all the open ports, well, the open ports which are listed under the top 1000 ports and their services. However, what if, let's say, a target host has their ICMP responses disabled? Then if you try to perform a ping on that device, we will not get a response and we'll think that host device is offline. We can use another parameter, which is nmap dash capital P, and this will perform something known as an ICMP timestamping. What this will do, it is actually configured to determine whether a system is online, and more specifically, many firewalls actually configured to restrict or block ICMP echo requests. However, by using the dash capital P syntax or parameter, we may be able to determine whether a host is available or not, because sometimes the configurations on the firewall may not be done properly. So let's actually send a message to a host and see what happens. So once more, I'm doing 172.1.21. And we got a little message here which says you are not root. So let's actually use sudo in front of our command just to ensure our command worked perfectly. So I'm going to enter my Kali password, going to enter once more, and there we go. It's actually performing an ICMP timestamp command. Well, scan that is, sorry. So let's say, for example, that we scan .21 initially without the -pp command. Well, if there's a firewall, the firewall would most likely actually block the ICMP echo request, and we would think the host is offline. However, since some firewalls may not have this rule configured properly, then using the -pp command, like as we did here, will bypass that restriction and help us determine whether this host is online or offline. If this technique does not work, there's another technique we can use which performs what we call ICMP address masking. It's a special type of ping, and this is used as an alternative to actually determine whether ICMP messages are able to pass through a firewall that may seem to be configured to be blocking echo requests from, let's say, an attacker machine. To perform this scan, again, let's use sudo just to be certain. We'll do dash capital P, capital M, followed by our target. So again, our target could even be a firewall or a system that has a firewall on it. So once more, we can see we are able to determine this host is online with these open ports and their running services. And lastly, we can do an IP protocol ping. To perform this type of ping scan, let's clear this once more. Let's do sudo nmap dash capital P, capital O, followed by our target IP. In this case, my target is 172.30.1.21. I'm going to hit enter. And as you can see, we got results. So these are various ways, these are various methods, these are various techniques which can be used if it is, let's say, a host device, whether it's a firewall, whether it's a router, contains any sort of security rules, access control lists that may be restricting ICMP messages from being processed. In this video, you discovered how to perform various ICMP probing techniques using Nmap on Kali Linux. In the next video, we'll take a look at understanding common evasion techniques. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is Section 3, Hands-on with Network Assessments. In this video, we'll take a look at understanding common evasion techniques which are used during scanning when performed by a penetration tester or an ethical hacker. So let's dive on in. So you're probably wondering, why or what do we need to evade? To put simply, when performing, let's say, ethical hacking or even penetration testing, the security professional who's conducting these tests need to ensure that their attacks are not detectable by the organization's, let's say, security solution or the organization's security appliances. To put simply, the purpose of performing ethical hacking and penetration testing, it is to simply identify any sort of security vulnerabilities within your organization and their assets and try to remediate or implement some type of countermeasures or even mitigation techniques to prevent a real cyber attack from occurring. When performing, let's say, scanning and even creating some type of malicious payloads, there are various techniques and tools which can be used to reduce the risk of detection. In this video, we'll take a look specifically at reducing the risk of detection while performing scanning. So let's dive on in and take a look at using Kali Linux and Nmap to evade detection and create decoys. So currently, this is my Kali Linux machine, and this machine is connected to an isolated network within my lab environment. And please be reminded that you should not perform any sort of scanning on systems or networks which you do not have legal permission to do so, unless you own the systems. Okay, so without further ado, let's open the terminal. And what we want to do first is let's check to see the network that we are connected to. To put simply, we can use an IP-addr command like so and press enter. Currently, you'll notice that I have a couple of network adapters, which is Ethernet 0, Ethernet 1, Ethernet 2, and even a virtual Docker adapter. To put simply, only one of these physical adapters, which is the Ethernet adapters, has an IP address. So currently, this is the IP address of my Kali Linux machine on the network that I'm on, and I'm on the 172.1.0/24 network. So I'm going to copy this, and let's actually perform a basic Nmap scan to actually identify the number of systems on our network. We could do sudo nmap and sn And this will perform a ping scan as we have learned thus far. And I'm just going to change this to a .0 like so and press enter. It's going to ask for your Kali Linux password. This is the password that you use to log into Kali Linux. So now it's performing a ping scan on the network. And right now, as you can see, there's a number of devices which are currently on my virtual network. There's .1, which is a gateway. We can simply ignore this. But most importantly, we can see there's a .21, a .22, 23, and even 20. So if you recall, my IP address is .20. So currently there's 3 devices on our network, 21, 22, and 23. So why do we need this information? Well, what we can do is we can simply use the 22 and 23 as decoys while scanning the 21. So in other words, we can send a number of different packets to our target, and let's say our target is the 21, and the target will think that the 22 and 23 is actually scanning him or it. So how could we do this? Actually, it's quite simple. So to do this, all we need to do is copy our target IP, which is .21, and we just need to know the IP addresses of our decoys. Before performing this, it's very important that you have your decoys online. In other words, that's why we perform the ping scan to actually identify whether our decoy machines are actually online or offline. Because the simple scan of using the decoy will not work properly if your decoy machines are offline. So I'm going to clear this and let's do sudo nmap, and we can see our target, which is 172.30.1.21. And remember that this IP could be any IP on your network or within your lab environment. In my environment, this is the target IP that I'm using. I'm going to use -D, and this will specify to allow us to choose our decoys. So if you remember, we have the 22 and we also have the 23. So we're going to put a comma, going to paste this in once more. Oops, I made a mistake. So let me fix this. This will be 22 and backspace some of this. Oops, I need to change this one as well. So this is 23. Okay, so right now our target is the 21 and we have 2 decoys, which is 22 and 23. So I'm going to hit enter, and right now it says we cannot perform the scan, unable to actually get the host name. Oh, so what could we do next? Since the scan did not work, we could take a look at the error that we got. So by hitting enter, there's actually a space right here, which I did not notice a moment ago. So I'm going to press up once more, and I'm going to remove the space so it looks like this. And now I'm going to hit enter, and the scan is going to work. So this will take a few seconds to actually perform the nmap scan on our target, which is .21, and it will be using .22 and 23 as decoys. So currently, we get our results down here to see the open ports and their running services. But on the victim side or target side, the target, which is .21, will think the scan is actually originating from these 2 systems. So it reduces the risk of being detected as using a Kali Linux machine. Another technique we can use is actually perform MAC address spoofing by using nmap. So let me clear the screen. And currently, we can use sudo nmap, and we can use --spoof -mac, like so, and we can specify 0. 0 simply means choose a random source MAC address on Kali Linux when performing the scan. If you recall, when you perform a scan, your source IP address and your source MAC address is also inserted in every packet that is sent across the network. So by simply spoofing your MAC address, it's simply masquerading the true identity of your system. So in other words, let's imagine that the spoof MAC address is a Cisco device. A cybersecurity professional may think that the source of this attack is originating from a Cisco device. Just saying. So now we can specify our target, which is, in this case, 172.30.1.21. And again, this is an IP address on a target within my network. So please be sure to use an IP address within your private or your personal network for these techniques. Go ahead, enter. And look at this. It actually generated a random source MAC address, which is quite awesome actually. However, it says the host seems to be down. If it's really up, try using -pn. So let's actually try that. So we're going to use -p and n, and this should scan without actually, let's say, for example, sending an ICMP probe to the target. So let's hit enter and see what happens again. So it's spoof a MAC address. It's still saying, okay, spoofing is done. One IP address, 0 host up. This seems to be a little problem. So right now, there's a little problem here. And let's see if we could try another technique. So we are still going to spoof MAC addresses, but we're going to try something a little different. Another technique we could use is to actually change our MAC address directly on the network interface card using a tool called MAC Changer. To do this, let's check our network adapter's MAC address first. We can do ifconfig, hit enter, and on my system, I'm actually using Ethernet 1. You can see my IP address. You could also see the actual MAC address on the interface. To actually get started, we need to change the state of Ethernet 1. And of course, my system is using Ethernet 1. You need to change your network interface to a down state. To do this, let's actually use the command sudo ifconfig eth and specify your number and simply type down, and this will change the interface to down. Next, what we can do is macchanger-h, and this will show us the various options we have available to actually change our MAC address. So we can choose a particular vendor MAC address by using -l, or we can just use -A, which simply sets a random vendor MAC address of any kind on our interface. So let's use a -a command. We use sudo macchanger, like so, -A, and specify our interface. And notice that we have our current MAC address, our permanent MAC address, which is hard-coded into our network interface card, and now the MAC Changer tool is giving us a next GTV MAC address on our interface. So what we want to do next is actually turn up our interface, and let's do sudo ifconfig eth1 up, and let's verify the interface is actually up with a new MAC address. We could do ifconfig once more, and looking here on the ETH1 for my network adapter, I'm actually using the new MAC address. So simply by using this technique, let's say for example, the Nmap scan that would have allowed us to spoof our MAC address directly on Nmap did not work out, you can simply use the MAC Changer tool, just as you saw a few seconds ago, to actually change the MAC address on your network interface card during your security testing or ethical hacking or penetration testing. Keep in mind, do not use these techniques for any malicious purposes or any sort of illegal acts. During the course of this video, we took a look at understanding the need for using various evasion techniques, and you have also learned a skill on performing evasion techniques using network scanning, such as spoofing your MAC address by using MAC Changer, and also spoofing your IP address and using decoys using Nmap. In the next video, we'll take a look at assessing remote information services on a network. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is Section 3, Hands-on with Network Assessment. In this video, we'll take a look at assessing remote information services on a network. So without further ado, let's dive into Kali Linux and we'll take a look at exploiting very common network services on a target system. So here we are back at Kali Linux. Let's perform a simple network scan to actually determine whether our target has a particular port, and let's say this port is Remote Desktop Protocol. Could use -P, and Remote Desktop Protocol uses port 3389. So let's see if our target has this port open. If it does, well, definitely we know it's a Windows system because Windows uses RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol. Let's hit enter. And currently we could see 3389 is open on our target. So this means, hey, well, there must be RDP running on the target itself. So how could we attempt to, let's say, gain the administrator password or gain the password to log in to our remote target? So what we can do is we can use a tool such as Hydra. Let's say Hydra-T space 4. This is specify timing, could use -L, specify administrator, like so. So in other words, common L specifies a username. I could specify a password, so you could do -P and specify, well, we could use -common P to specify a single password, or we could use -P and specify a word list. So there's a ton of word lists in the usr/share/wordlist directory. And if I press tab a couple of times, you could see a number of directories exist here. But I have this specific word list, which is ROCU, which is already extracted. And we specify RDP as a protocol, // and the target. So if I hit enter, Hydra is going to actually use the words from this word list with this particular username against this target on the RDP service. Once the password is found, it will display the username and password on our terminal interface. So I'm going to hit enter and let's see what happens. So it's taking some time. We can see it's actually attacking the RDP service. And after a couple of seconds of going through the word list, it found that RDP is definitely open on port 3389. This here is a target. We have a login name and we have a password, which is pretty awesome. What we can do next is attempt to log in to this target. So remember the username is administrator in this case, and the password is Vagrant. So we could do our desktop, specify the username like so, specify the password, specify the target, and specify the resolution. So we're going to enter now, and this is going to open up a remote desktop protocol session from our Kali Linux machine to our target itself. So like so, and check this out, we actually in our target machine via an RDP session. So we have full control and we are the administrator. So I'm just going to log off, and as you can see, it's that simple to actually crack the password. However, please keep in mind that the password list is only as good as if the password actually exists within the root file. Since our system is a Windows-based system, we could search for very specific vulnerabilities and ports on our target. Over the past few years, there's a very well-known vulnerability known as Eternal Blue. And Eternal Blue has affected many Windows operating systems that is unpatched or just simply is outdated or probably legacy systems. So to get started, let's see if Windows Server SMB is running, or at least server message block on this version of Windows. So let's do sudo nmap and we can specify a number of ports. So SMB runs on a few ports. So let's scan between 136 to 139. And let's also include 445 as well too, together with our actual target is 172.1.21. Hit enter. Need to enter my sudo password. Hit enter there once more. And we can see a few of these ports are closed and a few is actually open. So this is a bit suspicious, but we still have 445 open, which is SMB as well. So let's try to see whether this target, which is .21, is vulnerable to Eternal Blue, which is the vulnerability actually. Gonna clear this, gonna do sudo msf console to open Metasploit, like so, and Metasploit is gonna load. So let's give this a second or two. And Metasploit is loaded. So you can see there's a number of exploit modules, some auxiliary modules, some post-exploit modules, payloads, encoders, no operations, and evasion. So we can search for actually, we could search for MS17-010 and press enter. This will show us all the modules that are related to Eternal Blue. So each of these here is a module, and you can see it's an exploit module for Windows. We could see the category and the actual name of the module. We also have the number, we also have the description as well that tells us what a module does. So let's say, for example, that we want to use this first module. Well, this here is an exploit, but we want to check to see whether our target is vulnerable to the SMB remote code execution. So we could use this auxiliary scanner to actually determine whether our target is vulnerable or not. So to do this, we could say use, and we could simply copy the entire module like so. Copy, right click, paste. And next we could type options to see what options are required. So we type options here, we could see we have yes, this is already set. Yes for our host, but our host value is not set. Our host is actually our target. Our port, our remote port is set as well. Threads is 1. So let's do set, and let's say set our host and specify our remote host, which is 172.30.1.21. Hit enter. Do options one more time. I could see now the R host value set. We can simply type run, or we could type exploit to actually launch this module, but since it's an auxiliary, let's just type run, hit enter, and right now it performed a little scan to determine, and says here, host is likely vulnerable to MS17-010, and the system seems to be Windows Server 2008 R2 standard. We have the build number together with the service pack number as well. So I'm going to type back to go back to the previous interface of Metasploit. Going to type search one more time. And can't seem to find it. Okay, I'll just have to search. And let's do it 17-010. Hit enter. And let's actually use this first exploit. If this first exploit works, then we'll be able to perform remote code execution on our target. So I'm going to copy this, use, paste the module, I'm going to type options, and check this out. We have a payload automatically coupled on to this actual exploit. So what's the purpose of the exploit and the payload? The exploit is what takes advantage of the vulnerability on the target or on the victim system. The payload is what happens next. So in other words, we're using the exploit to break in, and the payload is going to create what we call a reverse TCP shell, but it's going to use Meterpreter to help us communicate with the remote system. For this, we actually need to set, let's see, so yes, for this, we need to set our host for the exploit, and we also need to set the local host for the payload. The local host is our IP address, and that's where the payload will call back to, and it's using a default port of 4444. You could use another port if you want, but just for simplicity, I'm going to leave this as 4444. So we're going to do set our host, and it's 172 30.1.21. I'm going to do set, and I can't remember my IP address, so I'm going to check it here right now, IP-ADDR, and my IP is .20. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to say set lhost, paste in my IP. I'm going to do options one more time, and now we have the rhost set, and we also have the local host set, so which is good. So now we could type exploit, and hopefully this should work. So let's see. 3, 2, 1. There we go. It's checking. It seems to be the host is vulnerable. It is sending the exploit, and it will then send the payload across. So let's give this a couple of seconds, and it seemed to be working. It sent the payload, and now check this out. We have a Meterpreter session. This is super awesome. Now, Meterpreter allows us to communicate with the host remotely. The cool thing about Meterpreter is it runs in memory on the target system, which means to say it does not write any sort of data on the disk. In other words, it reduces the chances of being detected, or it reduces threat detection. We could type help to see a list of all the awesome commands we could do. So let me scroll up. We have the core commands, which is pretty awesome. We could get info about the system. We have file system commands, so we could copy data, we could upload data, we could move across files. We have networking commands here, which is super amazing. We have system commands. We have user interface commands. And check this out, we could even capture keystrokes. We can even take screenshots and view the victim's monitor or desktop in real time. We could turn on their webcam, even play audio through their speakers, and even more. Now, one of the cool things that we would like to do is, let's say we want to get the hashes of the user's password or the local user's password. We could type hash dump like so and press enter. And just like that, we are able to get all the local usernames and their passwords. Well, not their passwords specifically, but their password hashes. So this here is a LM hash, and this one is a NTLM hash. Using the username and hashes of the passwords, we don't necessarily need to perform password cracking on these password hashes. We could perform techniques known as pass the hash, which simply allows us to gain access to systems and services without even cracking the password. That's super awesome, actually. So just to give you an idea on how we could use pass the hash, I'm going to copy this hash of the administrator password. And remember, this here is the administrator account. So I'm going to open a new tab, and let's perform a pass the hash technique really quickly, just for you to get an idea on how awesome this is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a tool which is called pass the hash, and this is actually the command. So it's pth-winx capital U for the username, which is administrator. We're going to put a % here. Then we're going to specify the LM hash, the NTLM hash, space, double slashes, the target IP address, and I could say CMD. So what's going to happen is we should get a Windows shell coming back to our system. So check this out. 3, 2, 1. There we go. We actually pretended to be the administrator, and we did not even need to provide the actual password. We simply literally passed the hash across the network. And this looks really familiar. This is the Windows command prompt. So if I type who am I am the administrator on the actual target system, which is super cool actually. So now let's head over back to our first terminal where we have our Meterpreter session. We could type, let's say for example, sysinfo to determine what type of system that we have just broken into, of course ethically. And we could see we have the host name, we have the operating system architecture, we could determine whether it's on, let's say for example, a domain or not on a domain. For example, it's in workgroup, so it's not on a domain. The thing about running Meterpreter, we could even determine what is a privilege or the user privileges that Meterpreter is running on the target system. we could use a command such as get ID, and we could see we are currently the system. Well, we have system level privileges on the actual victim system, which is pretty cool. Now, the thing about breaking into our system is that we want to try to remain as undetectable as possible. So this means to say, what if we could migrate our process into a less suspicious process? So in other words, if we type PS, we could see all the processes running on the victim system. For example, we could see the process ID, the process itself, and who is running that process, and a little description as well. What if we could migrate our process into a less, how to say, suspicious process? So you could use a post exploitation module, such as we could type run, say post. Okay, so you could say post. This is a Windows system, so you say Windows manage. I could say migrate, and check this out. So it's running the module against this host. This is the current process, which is pool sv.exe, the process ID. It created a new process, calls it notepad.exe, and it migrated our process from this number to this number. So in other words, on the target system or the victim system, they will think that, hey, Notepad is running, but it's actually Meterpreter that is using that particular shell. Super cool. Furthermore, if we want to get, let's say, the Windows native shell on our system, we type shell. And just like that, we have the Windows command prompt. Type who am I, and I am the system. So in other words, if I am the system, this means I have higher level privileges as compared to the actual administrator. This means to say I could also perform any sort of actions. I could upload stuff, download stuff, copy data, migrate data, or I could do anything on this system because this is the highest level of privileges on the compromised system, which is super amazing. In this video, we look at exploiting common network services, which is SMB and remote desktop protocol. In the next video, we'll be starting section 4, which is advanced network security techniques, and you'll take a look at the learning objectives and the items which will be covered in the next section. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to a deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is section 4, advanced network security techniques. In this video, we'll take a look at discussing the learning objectives for section 4. So let's dive on in. In this section, you'll learn how to fingerprint servers. You'll also learn how to identify and assess reverse proxy mechanisms. We'll take a look at enumerating virtual hosts and websites. Furthermore, we'll take a dive into identifying subsystems of our actual system. Then, we'll take a look at using components with known vulnerabilities on a victim system. And lastly, we'll be exploring Apache web servers and crawlers. In the next video, we'll take a look at fingerprinting servers. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is section 4, advanced network security techniques. In this video, we'll take a look at fingerprinting servers. So let's dive on in. By fingerprinting servers, we will be able to understand the underlying technologies such as web technologies and server applications which are running on a web server. To get a better idea, let's start up our Kali Linux machine, like so, and we will just log in. And now that we are within our Kali Linux machine, one of the first things we want to do is open our terminal, like this. And let me just make this a little bigger for you to see properly. Let's check to see what are our network adapters and our network range. We can simply use the IPADDR command, and we can see there's a number of network adapters associated to this Kali Linux machine. On this machine, we are currently using adapter Ethernet 0, and it's currently on this network. Now, my IP address is .102. However, we can scan this entire network to determine whether there is, let's say, any web servers on our same subnet. To do this, we can use nmap. So we could do sudo nmap like this -p, and let's specify the ports for HTTP and HTTPS. So let's specify port 80, 8080, and let's use port 443, which is for HTTPS, and we'll specify our entire network range. So let's change this to .0/24, and let's hit enter. We'll enter our password for Kali Linux machine because we are using the sudo command. This scan should take us a few seconds, so probably a minute or two to complete. It will simply perform a scan on the entire subnet and look for any devices that has port 80, 8080, and 443 that is open. Once it finds a system with any of these three ports open, it's an indication that there's a web application or a web server running on these default ports. So the scan is completed, and let's take a look at our results. So you can see that there's .1, but we'll ignore .1. .1 is simply the DHCP server, so we'll ignore that one. There's .100. .100 is port 80, it's filtered. There's 443, which is also filtered as well. However, let's take a look at .101. 101 has port 80 open, 443 closed, and port 8080 closed. And 102, I think it was our machine. Let me just double check. Let's run IPADDR once more. And yes, so 102 is our machine. So let me scroll up. And therefore, our target is definitely 101. So if we see port 80s opened on, let's say, targets such as 192.168.56.101, we can copy this address. We can open our web browser like so. And we can enter the IP address. And let's specify HTTP :/ like that, hit enter, and look, we actually have a web page loaded. So this web page is a default web page for our vulnerable machine, which is not Metasploitable 2. And here are the different vulnerable web applications within Metasploitable 2. Another tool we could use to actually identify, let's say, the underlying technologies is a tool known as WhatWeb. So we could type WhatWeb and then specify the IP address of our target. So our target being 192.168.56.101, let's press enter, and it will profile and provide us with the technologies such as a web application and any sort of additional technologies that is running on our target. So this will take a few seconds to probably a minute or two to complete. Oh, and look at that, finish very, very quickly. So we got an HTTP 200 OK status, which is excellent. It means to say the web application and the web page is available. We can see the target is running Apache, specifically 2.2.8. The country is left out, it's reserved. The web servers and the HTTP server is running on a Ubuntu Linux system. Again, we have Apache 2.2.8 Ubuntu. It's using dev2. We have the IP address. It's also running PHP. And I think that's about it. Yeah, so it's Apache, PHP on a Ubuntu-based system. What we can also do is we can use nmap once more. So we can use nmap -O, like so, to actually profile the operating system of the server that is running the web application. So this scan should take us a few minutes to complete. So let me just use sudo, hit enter, and this will tell us the underlying application, the underlying operating system which is hosting the web application. Okay, so the scan is finished, and this time to actually perform a full scan on the entire system itself. Looking on further, we can see where it says OSCP, it's a Linux-based system. Apart from what web is telling us that it's a Ubuntu system, here it is just telling us it's a Linux-based system. Another tool we could use is within our web browser. We can use a tool such as Netgraph. Netgraph is actually a website. We can simply search for Netgraph like so. And let's click on www.netgraph.com. Netgraph has a super awesome tool. If we scroll down, what we can look for is this portion that says, what's that site running? We can simply enter a website, and let's say we enter like www.microsoft.com, like so, and let's hit enter to begin the search. And we need to specify the URL. So let's do https:// hit enter once more. And what this will do, it will provide us the actual technologies, the servers, the network block, and any other relevant information for this domain. So currently, this is the result. So we can see the site title, which as we know is a Microsoft. We can see the first date it was ever seen, 2004 in May. Scrolling further, you could see the network block information, who is hosting the site, the public IPv4 addresses, the public IPv6 addresses, the associated internet service providers, which is their AS numbers. We can also see the domain registrar information, the DNS information as well. We can see the network blocks that we use to host this IP address. We can get a somewhat specific geographic location as well. We have the SSL and TLS information on this web server. Scroll down further, we get the certificate information. It could actually help us identify whether the target web server is vulnerable to the poodle attack or Heartbleed. And look at this, we actually get a hosting information. So we could see who the hosting block owner. We can get the IP address. We can see the operating system of the server, which is hosting the web application. The web server application is hidden here, which is a good thing. You can see the last date seen. So this date is very recent to today's date at the point of recording, because currently we are in August 2021. So this is very, very close to the present time of recording. So this means to say, most likely this is the current IP address for the web server. Scroll on further, we can see if there's any SPF, which is a sender policy framework, any DMARC, any sort of web trackers. But look at this. We even have the site technology. So you can see the server-side technologies, and you can see the client-side technologies and any sort of client-side web scripting technologies. In this video, you took a look at understanding the importance of performing fingerprinting, as it will help you understand the underlying technologies which is running on a remote server. Most importantly, we took a look at using Nmap, WhatWeb, and even using an online tool such as Netgraph to actually fingerprint a web server. In the next video, we'll take a look at understanding the importance of enumerating virtual hosts and websites. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Council. This is Section 4, Advanced Network Security Techniques. In this video, we'll take a look at enumerating virtual hosts and discovering whether there are any hidden websites. So without further ado, let's dive on in. To get started, let's head over to Kali Linux, like so, and let us open our terminal. Once we're on our Kali Linux machine within our lab, let's use the ipaddr command to verify our interfaces and the network that we're connected to. So currently, I'm connected to a private network using my Ethernet 0 adapter, and I'm on the 192.168.56.102 network. So I'm going to copy this IP address like so, and I'm going to perform a simple Nmap scan. So I'm going to do Nmap space the network ID together with the network prefix like this. What this command will do, it will perform an entire scan within my private network and show me the number of devices that are available together with any device and their open ports. And the scan is completed. So let's take a look at this. Currently, we have a device which is 192.168.56.101. And let's copy this IP address just in case. Looking down further, we can see port 80 is open. And the cool thing is port 80 is mapped to HTTP. So this means to say there's a web server running on this target system. Next, we can use nmap to actually perform something known as HTTP enumeration. So let's do nmap space -- script space, and we'll type HTTP -enum for enumeration, and let's specify our target. Nmap will simply seek out any URLs, any hidden directories, and present it to us on this target system. And whoa, look at all the responses we got. This is a lot of results. So let's actually clean up our results a little bit better. So I'm gonna clear this once more, and let's run back the command, but this time let's use -p and specify port 80. So therefore, nmap will not perform scanning on any additional ports on our target. So let's hit enter now, and the results is going to return. So as you can see, our results is a bit cleaner. Currently, we can see there are various resources that are available on our target system. So what we can do next is we can simply visit our target by opening our web browser and visit each of these actual resources, which may be folders or even sensitive directories. Another tool we can use is something known as dirbuster. So let's type dirbuster like this and hit enter. And this will open the user interface like this. To get started, we can simply enter the IP address of our target like this, and let's specify the actual protocol, HTTP:// and the actual IP address of our target. And what we want to do next is to actually find a word list. Using a word list will help dirbuster to actually query the word list towards or to the actual target. Therefore, the word list will simply help dirbuster to find any sort of hidden directories on our target system. So to add a word list on dirbuster, let's click on Browse right here, and let's navigate to our USR directory. So let's use a drop down. Let's go to the root directory like so, and we have a bunch of word lists stored in the USR share. And inside here, let's look for word list. Or you can simply click on a folder like this and type WORD, and it will quickly find the folder word list. And check this out. Inside here, there are tons of word lists that we can use. So let's click on dirb, and let's choose, let's say for example, we use a common word list, which is common.txt. Let's click select. Now, to actually perform the scan, let's click on Start, and Start is right here. So what is happening, it is actually seeking out all the hidden directories and presenting it to us right here on our command line interface. So you can see a file is found, and we can also see directories are being found. And let's click on OK, and you must enter, okay. Let's click on cancel for this one. Are you sure to cancel? Yes. So it will continue, and this should take a couple of minutes to complete. So while the scan is running, we can wait a few minutes, and what we can do now, while the scan is running, let's click on Result List View. We can see all the files that was found. We have some HTTP 200 codes, which is successful. We have some 4 trees. Let's click on Result Tree View, and this view is really important because this view is going to show us the actual hierarchy of where certain directories are located together with where these resources can be found. For example, we can see there's a few folders inside here. So there's a htpasswd folder. Let's click it. Okay, there's nothing inside here. Let's click on one that has 200, such as phpMyAdmin. And check this out. We actually have even subdirectories here. We can even expand these directories. Look for sensitive information. We have a dab folder. Inside here, there's a PHP page. And there's even additional resources hidden in some of these folders here. So I'm going to stop this tool because as you can see, it will take a very long time to complete, which is approximately 3 hours. So at this point, you have an idea on how to use Nmap to actually perform enumeration. And you also have seen how to use dirbuster. The thing about using dirbuster, because it's using a word list, it takes a really, really long time to complete. However, as a cybersecurity professional or even a network security professional, you need to ensure that a scan completes because you can even find hidden and sensitive information that is within web applications, and such information can lead to security vulnerabilities. In this video, we took a look at actually performing enumeration of a website on a target host. In the next video, we'll be covering identifying and assessing reverse proxy mechanisms. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessment by AC Console. This is Section 4, Advanced Network Security Techniques. In this video, we'll be discussing on how to identify and assess reverse proxy mechanisms. So let's dive on in. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is a reverse proxy? To put simply, we know a proxy is simply a type of server or a device that sits between an internal network and, let's say, the internet. We have the forward proxy, which we commonly know, which simply intercepts and forward internal client requests out to the internet. However, a reverse proxy simply forwards the traffic in the reverse direction. Just a bit confusing, right? So the reverse proxy will simply intercept and forward requests from a system that is located on an external network such as the internet and forward those messages to an internal network or a device on the internal network. For example, you can have a reverse proxy that is configured and is implemented between the internet and a web server. So therefore, let's say for example that you are visiting a web server. Your traffic will originate from your computer and it will hit the reverse proxy. The reverse proxy will simply intercept the traffic, inspect it, and forward it to the internal web server. That's a cool thing about using a reverse proxy. However, detecting and identifying a reverse proxy is sometimes easy depending on the security mechanisms implemented by the owner of the reverse proxy. So in this video, we'll take a look at using a tool to help us identify whether there's a reverse proxy or even a web application firewall that is sitting before or in front of a web server. To get a better understanding, let's take a look at Kali Linux because there's a pretty cool tool that we can use. This tool is known as WAF actually. So let's click on applications here and let's type WAF and W00F and look, the tool is right here. So let me maximize this a little bit for you to see better. And what this tool does, it simply checks to see whether there's a web application or any sort of proxies between us as in the sender and let's say our target as being a web application or a web application web server. This tool is very, very easy to use. As you can see, the usage is simply specifying the tool name followed by a URL or even multiple URLs. So what we can do is let's copy the name of the tool and let's specify a URL such as www.microsoft.com. So let's hit enter, and this should take a few seconds to actually complete. Okay, so let's see. It was checking https ://www.microsoft.com. It seemed to bump into some type of error here, but look at this. Down here it says a site https ://www.microsoft.com seems to be behind a WAF or some sort of security solution. So this here is a simple indication that there may be a reverse proxy or even a web application firewall that is sitting behind our target web server on the internet. Reason for blocking can be due to, let's say, packet level filtering. Let's try one other site as well. So let's hit up to get our history, and let's try Google. Like so, and let's hit enter. Once more, it will take just a few seconds to complete and provide us with the results. Look at this. It is telling us that there is no web application firewall detected by generic detection. Now, there may be a possibility that there are security mechanisms protecting Google website. However, this tool perhaps was not able to detect it. That's the thing about detecting reverse proxies and sometimes web application firewalls. Due to the security mechanisms, it's more like a hit or a miss. We may be able to detect it or may not be able to detect whether there's a reverse proxy or even a web application firewall. In this video, we took a look at understanding what is the need and the purpose of a reverse proxy and how it is typically used on the internet. Furthermore, we look at identifying and assessing reverse proxy mechanisms using the cool and sort of funny WAF tool. In the next video, we'll take a look at identifying subsystems. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is Section 4, Advanced Network Security Techniques. In this video, we'll take a look at identifying, also understanding what is a subsystem. So let's dive on in. To put simply, a subsystem is a self-contained system within another system. So let's imagine that you are running Windows and you want to run another system within Windows without having to install, let's say, a hypervisor such as VirtualBox or VMware. Well, guess what? Windows supports something known as WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux. To start the installation of WSL, you'll need to open your control panel on Windows like this. Then select Programs and Features. And on top here, on the top left-hand corner, we select Turn Features On or Off. This will open a new window like this. And we scroll down and you simply check this box which says Windows Subsystem for Linux. Once the installation is complete, it will ask you to restart. You simply restart. But the bigger question is, where are you getting these Linux subsystems to install? Well, within Windows 10, there's a Microsoft Store. Once you open the Microsoft Store, we can simply search on the top right corner here. We can search for Linux and hit enter. And take a look at this. There's Kali Linux, there's even Ubuntu, and there's Ubuntu 20.04 LTS, and there's even Ubuntu 18.04. There's also Debian. Now let's say we want to install Kali Linux as a subsystem. You simply click on this application here, and all we need to do is ensure that our system meets the requirements. So most likely, if your system has these requirements, it will work. We could click the overview, but look at this. It definitely tells you, hey, you need to ensure the Windows Subsystem for Linux feature is actually installed before actually going ahead and clicking install on this Kali Linux, which is pretty awesome actually. So once you have the Windows Subsystem installed, you can install any of these Linux subsystems directly from the Microsoft Store. Once you install a subsystem, you can simply open your command prompt and simply type the name of the subsystem. So in this case, I have typed Kali and hit enter. This had started a Kali Linux subsystem on my computer. Then I'd use this command lsb_release -a, and this verify which subsystems I have on my actual computer. So currently I can see there's Kali Linux, the exact version of Kali Linux is running, and then if I do ws --list verbose, I can see the subsystems and the actual state of the subsystem. So let's imagine that you are a security penetration tester and you compromise a Windows system. You simply need to gain a PowerShell terminal or a PowerShell interface on the compromised system, and you can use these commands to actually verify whether there's a subsystem or not. In this video, we took a look at understanding subsystems and how to actually enable Windows subsystem for Linux on Windows 10. You also have discovered how to get Linux subsystems from the Microsoft Store, and we saw some commands on how to verify whether a subsystem exists on a Windows operating system. In the next video, we'll take a look at using components with known security vulnerabilities. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is Section 4, Advanced Network Security Techniques. In this video, we'll be covering using components with known security vulnerabilities. So let's dive on in. So we're here with our Kali Linux machine, and let's get started by scanning our network. So we can open our terminal, and I'm just going to make it a little bigger, like so. We're going to type IP-addr to verify our network interfaces. So I'm actually connected to Ethernet 0 on the 192.168.56.102 network. So I'm going to copy this IP address like so. I'm going to type clear, I'm going to type nmap, and let's do -p for port. Let's do 80, let's do 8080, and even 443. So port 80 and 8080 is for detecting HTTP, and 443 is HTTPS. So I'm going to change this last octet to a 0. So therefore, nmap is going to scan my entire network and look for any systems with these 3 ports open, or any of these 3 ports open. So I'm going to hit enter, and the results should not take too long to populate. And there we go. So currently we have 2 systems. There is a 102 system, but these ports are actually closed. However, there's a 101. So what we can do, we can simply copy this IP address, then we can open our web browser, and one of the coolest thing to do is to simply visit the actual web application. So let's do http:// followed by the IP address, and let's hit enter. So this is our Metasploitable 2 virtual machine. Within this Metasploitable 2 virtual machine, there's a lot of vulnerable web applications. So let's click on DVWA. Once you're on the login page, let's use the username admin, and the password is password in all lowercase, like so. So you can simply choose to save the password or not, that's totally up to you. But let's take a look at exploiting something called file upload vulnerabilities. So one of the things that we want to look for is where we could upload a malicious file, and once we upload a malicious file, we can simply call the file as a user and gain a reverse shell on this target, the operating system that is running this web application. So to get started, let's click on upload. And here you can see there's an upload menu, so you can upload any file and it should be stored on the server. However, let's actually create a malicious payload on our Kali Linux machine. So let's open our terminal, and one of the first things we want to do is let's double check our IP address. So let's do IP-ADDR once more, like so. And this is our IP address. So we'll need this IP address to help create our payload. So now we have our IP address. Let's type clear. And now let's use a tool known as MSF Venom to generate our custom payload. So our payload can be MSF Venom as the name of the tool, like so. Then we'll do -p, and the payload is, let's say PHP will create a metinterpreter reverse shell. -p allows us to specify the payload, and this entire thing is the name of the payload actually. Type reverse_TCP, and this will allow us to create a reverse shell. And we'll need to specify our local port, so we'll do localhost equal, and let's keep it simple. Let's do 4444. And we also need to specify our local, oops, that's the host. So our IP is supposed to go there. All right, now we need to specify our L port, which is our local port to listen on. And we'll use 4444, like so. We'll do -f to specify the format. We'll create a raw format. So it will simply generate the PHP code for us. So let's hit enter. And this will generate a malicious payload for us, but it will give us the code. I forgot the syntax for lport, so I forgot the equal sign. Let me fix that. I'm gonna press up once more, backspace, equal, and now hit enter. And this should work fine. And there we go. So what we need to copy, it's from right here, and we're gonna copy this entire thing. So we're gonna copy this. Next, let's open our text editor. Let's see, we should have mousepad right here. Let's click on mousepad. Let's right click, paste our code there, click on file, save as, and now let's save our files in, let's say, downloads, and let's put a name. So let's put img.php. So this will be a PHP file. So let's click save. All right, so now we have our malicious payload saved in the format of a PHP file. Next, let's start Metasploit, and we'll use Metasploit to create a listener. But before we do so, let's copy the name of our payload like this. Let's open a new tab. So we'll do sudo msf console and hit enter. And let's enter our password for our Kali Linux machine. Hit enter. And this will start our Metasploit framework. To start a multi-handler, let's use, so you're going to say use exploit multi-handler, like so. Once we set a multi-handler, it automatically chooses a generic payload, but we don't want to use that payload. So let's do set payload, like so. Specify the name of our payload, which is PHP metinterpreter reverse TCP. Next, let's type options to see what options are needed to be set. So currently our L port is already set. So let's actually set the L host. The L host will be set L host like this, and we'll specify our IP address. So let's grab our IP from here. Copy. Gonna paste this in like so. Let's type options once more to ensure that everything is set perfectly. So now that we configured our listener, let's type exploit to start our listener. So our listener is listening on this IP address on this port. Let's head over back to our vulnerable web application. Let's click on browse, select our img.php file, click on open, and let's click upload. Take a look at this. It gives us a URL that we can use to execute the payload we now uploaded. Actually, let's copy just this portion of the address. Let's come across here and let's edit our URL. So backspace this, I'm gonna paste this in and hit enter. So what's happening now is we're actually calling this file. So once we call this file, it will be executed. Now, how do we know whether it's successful or not? Let's check Metasploit. And look at this. It started a reverse handler, which we already know. It sent a stage payload, which is from Metasploit, to our victim and it opened a session. Now we have a Meterpreter session. If we type help, we can see all the commands and all the actions we can perform on this target. So for example, we could kill various tasks, we could run certain scripts, we could even load various Meterpreter sessions, we could check for any commands, so we could type cat, we could download, we could even upload scripts, we could even perform port forwarding, and so on. In this video, we took a look at discovering and exploiting a vulnerable web application. In the next video, we will take a look at exploring Apache web server and performing crawling. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Council. This is Section 4, Advanced Network Security Techniques. In this video, we'll take a look at exploring Apache web server and crawlers. So let's dive on in. Here we are back at our Kali Linux machine, and let's actually check to see what network we are on. So if I use the IPADDR command, we have a number of network adapters, but I'm connected on Ethernet 0, and this is my actual IP. So I'm going to copy this, and what we want to do is actually scan our network to see whether there are any, let's say for example, web servers on our same network. So we'll do -p, and we'll specify port 80, 8080, 443, and the entire subnet. So let's hit enter. We're going to perform the scan once more, like so. And this should just take a few seconds to actually complete because it's looking for specific ports which are opened within our network range. So the scan is complete, and let's take a look at some of these. So we can see that even though it's showing port 80 and 443 on these systems, the port is filtered. However, let's take a look at this specific IP address, which is 192.168.56.101, and we're seeing port 80 is actually open. So let's copy this IP address like so, and we can use a tool such as NIC2. NIC2 allows us to actually look for vulnerabilities, any sort of sensitive information, or let's say sensitive directory that may be leaking on this web application or this web server. NIC2 is a free and simple tool to use. And to use NIC2, we can simply type NIC2 like this, -h, and specify our target. And let's hit enter. And NIC2 will actually identify if there's a host name. It will check for whether port 80 is open. But look at this, it's profiling the actual web application for us. So let's give this a few seconds to complete, and once it's completed, we'll analyze the result a little bit further. Okay, so NIC2 is completed. Let's scroll up and let's take a look at some of the results that we got. So you can see the server type is Apache 2.2.8. It's running on a Ubuntu-based system. Each of these symbols, which is a plus icon, so the plus symbols, it point out some type of important information that we'll need to actually take into account for some type of vulnerability that may exist. For example, let's take a look at this point. The /phpinfo.php page, somehow something seems to be wrong here. It was found. Well, probably this is a bad thing, or probably this is a good thing. However, let's take a look at these particular references. These references give us information that, hey, there's some type of PHP potential sensitive information that is being revealed at this URL. So we can take the IP address and paste this portion at the end to actually build an entire URL to find out what is being leaked or what seems to be sensitive. Another thing is, let's take a look at this one. This one is simple. This one is /doc/, and this is some type of sensitive directory that may be browsable. So what we can do, we can open our web browser. Let's enter the IP address of our target, like so. Type doc/, hit enter, and look at this. We have access to some sensitive directory which regular persons should not have access to, or any unauthorized person should not have access to. Going on further, we can see there's an add user directory. This might be very important. It might allow a threat actor, or let's say a hacker, to perhaps add new users or probably scripts at these locations. And look how much folders are available. Such things should not be available. Now, the thing about Nikto is Nikto will scan all the directory of this server and look for any sort of vulnerabilities that may exist. So each of these points is something that we need to read, and it provides us a description on what seems to be the issue or the security weakness. Furthermore, we can use a built-in crawler. So there's a tool known as Derb, and Derb allows us to actually spider and even crawl our website looking for sensitive directory. Derb is actually really easy to use. All we need to do is specify Derb and the actual URL. We can specify a word list and additional options if we see needed. However, to get started, we can simply say dirb and specify the target IP and hit enter. Oh, I actually need to specify HTTP. So let me do HTTP :/ as recommended, and let's hit enter. Now look, it's actually testing various URLs, and once we get a code 200, it means to say the actual web resource, such as a web page, is actually available. So this will take a few minutes to complete. And another thing to remember is if we get any 301, it's most likely a redirect. So it means to say that, for example, this URL exists. However, we get a 301, so which means 301 is a redirect. Scrolling up, we have a lot of sensitive directories that are being revealed though. The cool thing is Derb actually made these links hyperlinks. So you can simply click, and let's say we do copy link address, open our browser once more, and let's paste this inside here and hit enter, and look what we got. We actually got a PHP admin setup page. So I guess we can import configurations, export configurations, or even make adjustments here. Let's head over back to Derb. So as a security professional, whether it's network security, cybersecurity, or even information security, going through each of these links may reveal sensitive information. For example, look at this one, passwd. Perhaps there may be passwords, perhaps there might be sensitive user accounts. You can right click, and let's copy the selection once more, head over to our web browser, right click, paste and go, and we actually access some type of sensitive directory. However, we can even look for additional vulnerabilities within each of these directories. So while there's so much directories that we can browse, you need to take the time and go through the results of Derb and actually look to see whether some of these directories should be accessible by authorized users, and the ones that are not supposed to be accessed by authorized users should be restricted. In this video, we took a look at discovering a web application. We also took a look at crawling web servers and how we could use a simple tool such as both Derb and even Nikto to look for security vulnerabilities on a target web application. In the next video, we'll be discussing the conclusion of this course. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome back to a deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is Section 4, Advanced Network Security Techniques. So I simply want to say congratulations for making it this far into the video course. You have accumulated some amazing skills. You have seen how to use Kali Linux to perform various types of network assessments. You have learned so much awesome technologies, tools, and even strategies. So before we end, I simply want to share my social media links with you guys. Feel free to also connect to me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and even Instagram as well. And before you go, I just want to share with you one last thing. On the CodeRed e-learning platform, I've created a number of courses. So you can take a look at if you want to become Cisco CCNA certified with the latest exam, take a look at actually enrolling in my Implementing and Administering Cisco Solutions. And this course is actually aligned to the latest and most current version of CCNA. Additionally, you can take a look at enrolling in the fundamentals of networking concepts, protocols, and security. There's also my CompTIA Security Plus video series. There's my Mastering Network Security video course as well. And lastly, there's my Cisco Certified CyberOps course. This course is broken down into two parts to keep it very simple. If you want to get more information on cybersecurity operations, take a look at enrolling in part 1 and then part 2. So once more guys, thank you again for enrolling in my course, and I really do hope to connect with you in the future, and I do hope to see you once more in any of my future courses. So lastly, thank you again for enrolling in my course. Hi, and welcome to a deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is section 2, Network Assessments Methodology and Tools. In this video, we'll take a look at the learning objectives for this section. So let's dive on in. You'll be learning about the concepts and the functions of virtualization technologies, such as hypervisors, and how virtualization is used to improve IT efficiency within an organization. Next, we'll cover the fundamentals of information gathering using various reconnaissance techniques. Then, we'll take a look at various popular network scanning tools of the trade. And lastly, we'll explore how to use Metasploit to actually perform various scanning techniques and even exploitation on target systems. In the next video, we'll be starting Introduction to Virtualization Technologies. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to a deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is section 2, Network Assessment Methodology and Tools. In this video, we'll take a look at the introduction of the concepts of virtualization technologies. So let's dive on in. So what exactly is virtualization? Well, let's imagine that you want to run multiple systems or multiple operating systems on your existing computer at the same time. Well, the old-time way, you would need to create a partition on your hard drive. However, when you boot your system, only one operating system could run at a time. However, we can use the power and the technologies of virtualization to simply virtualize the hardware components within our computer or even within our server. These hardware components will include your motherboard, the CPU, memory or RAM, storage, input and output such as your USB ports, even your network interface card or network interface cards, and storage such as whether you have a hard drive or a solid state drive. So imagine you're able to place multiple operating systems within a virtual environment and have all of those virtual operating systems be running at the same time. When using virtualization, it simply takes advantage of the underutilized and unused resources of your system. Many persons will have a super awesome processor or even a lot of RAM on their servers and desktop. However, those resources will not be 100% utilized all the time. There would be a lot of underutilized resources. So one of the main advantages of using virtualization is the ability to support multiple servers, multiple desktops, and even multiple operating systems on a single physical hardware platform. And this hardware platform will contain the essential hardware components. Once more, CPU, RAM, storage, network interface cards, motherboard, even a power supply unit. And this is done by using something known as a hypervisor. So the hypervisor is pretty much an application, or let's say it's a software program, which is able to virtualize the physical hardware components of a physical computer or a physical server and create a virtualized environment. Once this virtualized environment is created, we can simply install an operating system on that virtualized environment. When we install an operating system within a virtualized environment, that operating system is referred to as a guest operating system. So the guest operating system will not be able to tell whether the virtualized environment is virtualized or whether it's actually installed on a real physical device. That's a cool thing about the hypervisor. It literally virtualizes the environment to make it a perfect environment to run the operating system. So imagine that you are using a Linux-based system. You can simply install Windows as a virtual environment. Or what if you are using a Mac and you want to use a flavor of Linux? Well, this is possible by using a hypervisor. Likewise, if you are running Windows and you want to install Linux. Overall, the hypervisor virtualizes the hardware and other components, therefore making the guest operating system functions as though it is running in a native operating environment. Additional benefits of the hypervisor includes creating a virtual network. So within the hypervisor of, let's say, system, you can create a virtual network between multiple virtual operating systems or virtual machines, and you can even bridge a virtual machine network adapter to the physical network and gain internet connectivity. That's pretty cool actually. There are two types of hypervisor. There's a type 1 hypervisor, which is commonly called a bare metal hypervisor. And the reason for that, it's because this type of hypervisor is installed directly on top the hardware. So you may be thinking, what do you mean by install on top the hardware? Well, as usual that we'll have an operating system installed on a hard drive or solid state drive. And once we hit the power button on a computer, that's the operating system that boots. Well, in this case, think of it as the type 1 hypervisor is the operating system. Once we hit the power button, the type 1 hypervisor boots. And this simply allows us to install virtual machines on this type 1 hypervisor. The benefit about using the type 1 hypervisor is each virtual machine has a much more direct access to the hardware resources. Some examples of a type 1 hypervisor includes VMware ESXi, which is free. You can also use Proxmox, which is also free, and even XCPNG, which is also free as well. Keep in mind that if you are going to use VMware ESXi, there are very specific hardware requirements to ensure that specific hypervisor operates on a particular device. If it don't, then you can use others. In this diagram, we can see that there's a hardware component at the bottom, which is the CPU, the RAM, the network interface cards, the storage, and so on. And the hypervisor is installed on top of the hardware. And on top of the hypervisor, there are multiple virtual machines where you can install Linux, Windows, or even another type of operating system. And each of these operating systems are a self-contained isolated environment. So imagine that this is one physical server and you perhaps has 5 virtual machines running at the same time. How cool is that? Another type of hypervisor is a type 2 hypervisor. The type 2 hypervisor is simply a software application which runs on top of your existing host operating system. The host operating system is the operating system that is currently running on your computer. So to put simply, the type 2 hypervisor installs on top of your existing operating system. So this means that if you have a laptop and you install a type 2 hypervisor, and let's say you install virtual machines on the type 2 hypervisor, you can carry your laptop to school, at work, or anywhere, and your virtual machines goes with you. Some examples of a Type 2 hypervisor includes VMware Workstation Pro, which is a commercial product. There's also VMware Player. There's a free version of it. And one of the most popular one is Oracle VirtualBox, which is commonly free. As shown in this diagram is a Type 2 hypervisor deployment model. There's the hardware of your computer, which is the CPU, the RAM, the network interface card, even storage. Then there's a host operating system, which could, let's say, be Windows 10, it could even be Mac, or even Linux. Then we'll install a hypervisor on top of your existing operating system, and then we'll put the virtual machines. The disadvantage of using a Type 2 hypervisor is that the host operating system uses some of the computing power, and what's left is made available to your hypervisor. When working in the virtualization environment, you'll come across a term known as VM sprawl. So what exactly is VM sprawl? To put simply, this is when you have many virtual machines running at the same time, but isn't sure which virtual machine is running a specific application. This means that if you have to remove or disable a virtual machine without the knowledge of the application, it can simply disrupt the services. And additionally too, to prevent VM sprawling, ensure you document the purpose of each virtual machine to keep proper record and accountability. Imagine having 10 or even 20 virtual machines running within your organization, and you're not too sure which virtual machine is providing a certain service or a role or a function for your company. And if you delete a virtual machine without knowing whether it's providing a specific role, whether it's a critical role, then you can definitely disrupt services. There's something known as VM escape protection. When we create a virtual machine, each virtual machine is within its own isolated environment. There's typically no way for an application to be able to access the resources outside of a virtual machine unless it is explicitly granted. Sometimes an attacker is able to perform something called VM escape. This is where the attacker is able to break out of a virtual machine and compromise other virtual machines on the same system and even the host operating system. Therefore, it's very important to ensure virtual machines and the hypervisors are always up to date to prevent VM escape. Sometimes you may need to virtualize an application rather than virtualize an entire operating system. You can use containerization. Containerization simply allows you to virtualize an application without having to deploy it within a virtual machine. This simply uses the resources for the application only as compared to running an entire virtual machine. A really good example of containerization technologies is called Docker. Docker allows you to run virtualized applications, whether it's on Windows, Linux, or even another operating system, without having the need to create a whole entire virtual machine just to run one application. Now, to get an idea about virtualization, this is VirtualBox, and as you can see, I have a number of virtual machines. Currently, my host operating system is Windows. However, I could run Linux. So if I click Start, in a few seconds, my Linux virtual machine is going to be powered on. And while this is running, let me start a few others as well. So I can power on, let's say, this machine here. Let's say this is Metasploitable 3. I could power this on, and let's run this in headless state. Headless simply means that we are running this in the background, but the virtual machine is currently being executed. So right now on my Kali machine, I have my login prompt. Let me just log in. And here we go. I'm working my virtual machine and still using my current computer as normal. If I open the web browser, I should be able to have full internet connectivity once I set up the networking correctly. And here we go. There's Google. So I have full internet connectivity on this virtual machine. So you're probably wondering, how is that possible? So let me shut down this virtual machine and let's take a look at the configurations. And I'm also going to shut down this other virtual machine as well. which is a vulnerable Windows Server 2008 system. So let's take a look at the settings on the Kali Linux virtual machine. If I click on settings, here I can see on the system, I can adjust the boot order like a real computer. I can adjust the base memory, which is a RAM allocated to this virtual machine. I could assign the number of CPUs to this virtual machine. I can even adjust the display memory, the storage, such as the virtual hard disk, and even connecting a virtual ID device. I can adjust the audio controller, and here's the networking aspect. Currently, there's a total of up to 4 network adapters, and I can select bridge mode. By selecting bridge mode, I could connect it to my Wi-Fi adapter. So there's a VPN adapter, there's my physical Ethernet adapter, and there's even my Wi-Fi adapter. And within this virtual environment, I connected a secondary adapter with a isolated private network, which is called the internal network, and the name of it is called PentestNet. I can even connect serial devices, such as I can enable the serial port and set what serial port number should I be using to connect a certain device. I can even add on USB device, create shared folders between my host operating system and even my virtual device. And the cool thing is, each of these virtual machines does not affect my host operating system, which is pretty cool actually. However, keep in mind that the more virtual machines that you install on your hypervisor, it is going to take up some storage on your hard disk or your solid state drive. Together with the more virtual machines powered on at the same time, it is going to be using some of the RAM and some of your CPU utilization of your existing system. In this video, we took a look at discovering the concepts of virtualization and have explored the benefits of using virtualization technologies. In the next video, we'll take a look at understanding the fundamentals of performing information gathering and reconnaissance. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Welcome to the deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is section 2, network assessment methodology and tools. In this video, we'll be covering the fundamentals of reconnaissance. So let's dive on in. Reconnaissance, to put simply, it is information gathering, and whether you are a penetration tester, an ethical hacker, the first phase is to gather as much information as possible on your target. There are two types of reconnaissance, or there's two types of information gathering. There's passive information gathering, and there's also active information gathering. With passive information gathering, the attacker simply uses various resources which are found, let's say, on the internet, such as social media websites, search engines, forums, blogs, and so on, to gather as much information as possible about the target itself. The cool thing about using passive information gathering is that it uses indirect methods to gather information about the target without actually engaging the target. So it's like trying to get the phone number of, let's say, your target organization, but rather than you visit the actual website of the target, you simply perform searches on, let's say, social media websites and check to see if the number is available on, let's say, the organization's Facebook page, or perhaps their Twitter page, or even their Instagram page. Passive information gathering, as mentioned, is an indirect approach. However, we can only gather so much information passively. However, if we need to determine, let's say for example, the DNS records, running operating system on their web server, the web application on their publicly available servers, and even specific details such as vulnerabilities, then we need to perform active information gathering. When using active information gathering or active reconnaissance, the attacker simply actively engages or directly engages the target to get the specific details needed. So while passive information gathering ensures that there's some level of anonymity, we can't always get everything. So to put simply, sometimes we have to use active information gathering to retrieve very specific details about the target. The main objectives of reconnaissance, to put simply, it is to collect network information such as the target's domain name, subdomains, publicly available IP addresses on their public servers, perhaps even retrieve their private IP scheme for their internal network. We need to determine what type of network protocols are being used, and determining the network protocols can simply lead to identifying vulnerable or even unsecure protocols, which we can use to take advantage or, to put simply, to exploit. We can even gather system information through various techniques of, let's say, enumeration, and these system information can be usernames, user groups, the routing table, system names, and types. Imagine getting a list of valid usernames for a system. Then that's like half the work done there. All we need to do next is to actually get a valid password to match the corresponding username, and we'll get access into the system. We can even look at collecting organization information, such as employees' data, company directory, location details. A lot of employees post a lot of sensitive information on social media websites. Let's say, for example, that there's an employee who takes a picture of their desk and there perhaps, let's say, post-its or even notes containing sensitive information that is publicly revealed to anyone on LinkedIn. Some employees even take pictures of their employee ID badges. These can lead to a threat actor who's actively looking for ways to actually gain physical access into the company. This threat actor can simply use that photo, use a little photo editing, and make a fake ID badge for him or herself. There are various reconnaissance techniques. Some of these techniques will include checking search engines such as Yahoo, Bing, Google, even DuckDuckGo as well to get as much information about the target itself, whether the target is an organization or even a person. We can even perform advanced Google search techniques, or better known as Google hacking or even Google docking. Information gathering through social media platforms is also very, very easy to do. These platforms are, let's say, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. We can even do footprinting on the company's website to determine any subdomains, any logon portals, whether there's specific person's name, extension, telephone numbers, email addresses, and anything that can help us to perform a cyber attack. Information gathering techniques also include performing email reconnaissance techniques, even using WHOIS to identify the registration information of a target organization domain. Performing DNS reconnaissance can also lead to identify additional subdomains and other servers that is related to the parent domain of the organization. We can even perform network footprinting techniques to discover host systems, running services, open ports, and even vulnerabilities on the network. Using social engineering can help us to retrieve and even trick persons into revealing sensitive information, and these persons can be employees of the organization. We can even try to trick them into performing some type of action, whether it is to click a malicious code to allow us to compromise the organization. In this video, we have covered the fundamentals of performing information gathering and explored various techniques and tools that are used in information gathering. In section 3, we'll be covering the practicals and hands-on exercises of using Kali Linux to perform both active and passive information gathering. In the next video, we'll take a look at the popular network scanning tools of the trade. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to the deep dive in network assessments by EC Console. This is section 2, network assessments, methodology, and tools. In this video, we'll take a look at simply discovering some of the very popular network scanning tools of the trade. So let's dive on in. While there are many tools that a penetration tester, a cybersecurity professional, or even a network security engineer can use to discover assets on a network, these are some of the top tools which are commonly used by penetration testers within the industry. There's NetDiscover. NetDiscover simply performs passive network scanning. In other words, it does not actually send probes on the network itself to discover assets. It simply listens for ARP messages, which is address resolution protocol messages that are being exchanged between host devices on the network. It simply captures those ARP messages, inspects the source and destination IP addresses, together with the source and destination MAC addresses which are associated with the IPs. Using passive network scanning, it simply reduces the risk of being detected while on a network. Next we have Nmap, which is Network Mapper. Just to put simply, it's called Nmap. The thing about Nmap is considered to be the king of network scanners. To put simply, it just does not scan networks only. It is able to perform vulnerability scanning on target systems to determine whether there are certain vulnerabilities and whether those vulnerabilities are exploitable on a host. So, to put simply, we can use Nmap to just not discover host systems, but we can profile operating systems of remote devices. We can even discover the service version of various network services which are running on a target system. We are able to discover security vulnerabilities and even determine whether these vulnerabilities are exploitable simply by using Nmap. When it comes to performing vulnerability assessment, one of the best tools of the trade is known as Nessus. Nessus is simply a commercial tool, but there's also a free version of Nessus as well. This simply allows penetration testers and even ethical hackers to simply discover the latest vulnerabilities and to determine whether these vulnerabilities exist on their target systems. Nessus, however, is able to help penetration testers to automate their vulnerability scanning and reporting solution. Furthermore, we can use Metasploit. So you're probably thinking, isn't that Metasploit is used to exploit systems? That's also correct, but keep in mind that there are various modules within Metasploit. And there are some of the auxiliary modules which are scanners, and these scanners can simply scan target systems to discover open ports and even determine if a target system has vulnerabilities as well. So while this list is very short, these tools could be used to perform very powerful actions in the right hands. In this video, we took a look at popular scanning tools of the trade. In section 3, you will learn how to use these tools to perform various types of scanning, and you'll also see it in action as well. In the next video, we'll take a look at exploring the features and functionality of Metasploit. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to a deep dive into network assessments by EC Console. This is section 2, network assessments, methodology, and tools. In this video, we'll take a look at exploring Metasploit using Kali Linux. So without further ado, let's dive on in. Currently, this here is Kali Linux. To start Metasploit, we can use a simple command which is msf console and hit enter. This will initiate Metasploit and show us a very fun and trolling banner. So let's give this a couple of seconds. And check this out, we actually have a pretty cool banner. If we type banner and press enter once more, we can change the banner as many times as we want. But the thing is that there isn't unlimited banners. There's just actually a few banners which is constantly rotated or recycled over and over. But the main thing is take a look at this. Metasploit, and this is a community version, it contains a little over 2,000 exploits. There's a little over 1,000 auxiliary modules. There's a little over 300 post exploits. There are some payloads, encoders, and even no operations. And check this out, there's even evasion modules. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is a module? Well, a module, to put simply, is just simply a thing that gives Metasploit some additional functionality. So for example, there are 2,147 exploit modules at this point in this specific version of Metasploit. These exploit modules are modules which simply allows us to literally hack something or actually take advantage of a security vulnerability. There's 1,143 auxiliary modules at this exact point of this recording. Now, that being said, it means to say whenever Metasploit updates, more modules may be added. But currently with this version of Metasploit I'm using, there's 1143 auxiliary modules. Auxiliary modules, to put simply, are scanners, so we can scan for, let's say, open ports, closed ports, running services. We can even scan to determine whether, let's say, target is vulnerable to a particular exploit before we launch an exploit. There's even the post modules, which are these 365 at this point of recording. The post modules are pretty much a post exploit modules. So let's look at it in this way. We use auxiliary modules to detect whether a system is live on a network and to also determine whether that system is vulnerable to specific security vulnerabilities. Then, once we find a security vulnerability, we can use a write exploit module within Metasploit to take advantage of that security weakness. Let's imagine that we are able to successfully take advantage of a security weakness. Then we can use a post-exploit module to perform additional actions. To get out exploits, we can couple payloads. So you're probably wondering what exactly is a payload? A payload, it's pretty much an after action after we have exploited a system. There's even encoders. Encoders are used to help evade antivirus detection. There's also NOPs, or better known as no operations. No operations modules also helps pad additional data into writing our own custom payload. And there's also 8 evasion modules, which is additionally used to reduce the risk of being detected. So you're probably wondering, okay, Metasploit is command line based, and that's a cool thing. But how do we use Metasploit? So we can start by typing the help command, like so, and press enter. And this here is how to use Metasploit. There's so many commands that we could use, and so many things. So we can use a question mark to get a basic help command. We could use cd to change current working directories, and we could even see the history. I want you to take some time and go through some of these commands, if not all, and just be a little familiar with the purpose of these commands. Now, to get you started, let's take a look at something. What if I want to see all the auxiliary modules? I could type show auxiliary or AUX and press tab and hit enter. And take a look at this. These are all the auxiliary modules within Metasploit. For example, there's an associated number. There's a type of module. In this case, it's auxiliary. There's some additional information such as server. Actually, let's take a look at this one. This is an auxiliary module. It is doing some type of spoofing action. It is doing some type of ARP spoofing action. And to be more specific, it is doing ARP poisoning, which is pretty awesome. How about we take a look at show exploits? There are so many exploits that we can use, but searching through all of these exploits are a little bit overwhelming. So let's clear this and let's actually search for something specific. So let's do search and let's search for VSFTPD and hit enter. Now the cool thing is this filters out all the search results and give us specifically what we are looking for. So currently we can see that there's a specific exploit for a Unix-based system that is related to the FTP service that is designed to create some type of backdoor in VSFTPD 234. We can see the disclosure date. We can see the rank of the exploit, which in this case, it's excellent. We have the description of the exploit. So how do we use this exploit? To put simply, we can copy this. So let's right click copy and we can say use and paste the entire exploit name right here and hit enter. Now another method is simply after you perform a search, there will be a number associated with the exploit. So you can say use 0 and press enter and it will give us the same result like so. So now we can see that we are now invoking this particular exploit. So now that we are within the exploit mode, what's next? We can do show info to get an idea of the description and how to use this exploit. So let's hit enter. And whoa, this just gave us so much information. So we have the name, we have the module, we have the platform, architecture, whether we need privileges or not, license, the rank, disclosure. We can even see who created this module and any sort of additional information. We can see the targets. We can see what options are required to actually get this module working. So for example, there's a parameter known as rhost. Currently it is not set, but it is required. And the description simply says here the target host, range, CIDR identifier, or host file with syntax. The R port, which is a remote port, is already set as default 21. And this here is also required. And down here, we actually have a better description of what this module does. Let's say, for example, that you're not really interested about the description. We can type options and hit enter, and we'll get only the related information that we need to know. For example, there's the parameter rhost, which needs to be set because required is yes, but the options are non-existent. So how could we set rhost? To put simply, we can say set, then specify the actual parameter name, and then say the actual IP address. So for example, let's do 192.168.56.101 and press enter. And now we can see the rhost value set to this specific target. So if I do options one more time, look at this. The rhost value is actually configured here now. The cool thing is that there's a payload and this is a payload set. So why do we need to couple a payload with an exploit? The exploit is pretty much a tool that we are going to use to break into a system. After we break into a system, then the payload will be used to perform actions afterwards. Currently, with this payload, cmd unix interact, there's nothing to be set here. So what should we do next? Well, now that we set the parameters of our exploit and the payload does not require any configurations, we can simply type the word exploit and press enter to launch this exploit. Please keep in mind, do not use this knowledge to attack any systems that you do not own or do not have legal permissions to do so. It is illegal to perform scanning and exploitation on systems outside of your network and also on systems you do not have legal permission to do so. This target system is a private system within my personal network. So if I type exploit, this exploit should work. So let's see. I'm going to hit enter. 3, 2, 1. Let's see. So it's doing something. It got some type of banner. It spawned a backdoor service. It seems to be running en route. And take a look at this. We have gotten a session. In other words, we've gotten a shell. And this shell is between our Kali Linux machine and the victim machine. So how do we know what's going on? Well, let's try something. The target is definitely a Unix-based system because this exploit only works on a target Unix system. So if I run, let's say, a Unix-based command, for example, uname space -a, gonna hit enter, and this should execute on the remote system. And look at this. It is Metasploitable, which is our victim system. If I type, let's say, arp-a, I should get the ARP cache. Whoa, and check this out. We're executing commands on our Kali machine, but it's actually being remotely executed on the victim system. How about if I do IPADDR to get an IP address of our victim? And this IP address, which is 192.168.56.101, actually belongs to our victim and not our Kali machine. Furthermore, I could type, let's say for example, I type exit. What's going to happen? This means that I've closed my session. Let's try something else. I'm going to type back. And now I'm back to my main Metasploit window. I'm going to search for, let's say, port scanner. I'm going to do search port scan and hit enter. And currently, I'm getting a list of all the modules that contains the keyword port scan. So for example, let's say I use, and let's do auxiliary /scanner port scan, and let's do syn. So let's do a syn port scan on a target. Let's type options to see our required parameters. And here, we already have most of these parameters set, but most importantly, we need to set an R host. So let's actually set the R host. We can use set G to set global, so we don't have to reset the R host anymore. And let's set our R host as Metasploitable. Let's do 192.168, and of course the IP address of our Metasploitable machine. So this is 56.101, hit enter. And oh, we are missing something. So let's type rhost space, and now it's actually set. To verify, type options, hit enter, and take a look at this. It's now set. So we can use either one of two commands to execute an auxiliary module. We can use exploit, which will work, but we can also use run. Run will also work on auxiliary modules. Having completed this video, we have explored just the basic functions of Metasploit, but we will take a further look into getting some more hands-on practice using Metasploit in Section 3. In the next video, we'll take a look at the learning objectives for Section 3, which is a practical side on hands-on with network assessment. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to the deep dive into network assessments by AC Console. This is Section 1, Introduction to Network Security Assessments. In this video, you'll get an understanding of what will be covered in this section, Introduction to Network Security Assessment. So let's dive on in. During the course of the section, you will learn how to set up a virtual environment for learning. You'll also understand how network security affects a business and the importance of it. You'll also learn how to explore various network services and identify ports. We'll also take a look at exploring network enumeration and scanning techniques. And lastly, we'll take a look at identifying vulnerabilities on a network and assets. In the next video, we'll get started by setting up a lab environment for our learning purposes. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to the deep dive into network assessments by AC Console. This is Section 1, Introduction to Network Security Assessments. In this video, we'll take a look at setting up your very own lab environment for learning. So let's dive on in. There's a few prerequisites which we need, which is a hypervisor. We'll need an attacking system, so we'll use Kali Linux. And we will need a vulnerable system. So now let's head over to Google and let's search for VirtualBox. Simply click on virtualbox.org. And on this big blue button which says download VirtualBox, let's click it. Here we can see there are various platform packages available based on your operating system, whether it's for Windows, OS X, or even Linux. I will be using Windows, so I will click on the Windows host file to download the file. Once you download the file, please install it. Use the default settings to install the VirtualBox application on your computer. Next, let's head over back to Google. This time, we'll be going to get Kali Linux. Kali Linux is a penetration testing distribution. So let's type Kali Linux in Google and hit enter. Now, let's click kali.org. To get a download link for Kali, let's click on Get Kali on top. As you can see, the creators of Kali Linux has made a wide range of deployment distribution images, such as there's for ARM systems, there's bare metal, there's virtual machines, there's mobile, even cloud and containers. For our exercise, let's click on virtual machines. Here, you can see there's a virtual machine image of Kali Linux for VMware and also one for VirtualBox. Simply click the download link to start the download. I already have this downloaded on my system, so I'll just cancel it, but you need to download it. Next, let's over back to Google. This time, we are going to search for a vulnerable machine which is known as Metasploitable2. So let's type Metasploitable2 in Google. And let's click on the SourceForge link. Simply click the green button to start the download, and the download should appear within a couple of seconds or two. Simply click on OK to save the file, and save it to a directory on your current computer. So now that you have VirtualBox installed, Kali Linux downloaded, and the Metasploitable2 zip file downloaded, let's actually take a look at setting these up. So now we can right click on the VirtualBox Kali Linux image, and let's choose Open With and select VirtualBox Manager. As you can see, this will import the virtual appliance for us. We don't need to install anything. This will take care of the entire process automatically. Simply click on Import, and this should take a couple of minutes to complete. Once it's finished importing, you will see it appearing in your VirtualBox Manager as shown in this window. Next, let's set up Metasploitable2. Simply right-click on the Metasploitable2 zip folder and select Extract All. Next, ensure you open the Oracle VirtualBox Manager and simply click on New. We will set a name for this new virtual machine. Let's call it Target Metasploitable 2. Next, let's set a type of operating system as Linux and the version as other 64-bit. We will leave the RAM or the memory size as 512. And for the virtual hard disk, we'll simply click on Use an existing virtual hard disk file. Then let's click this little folder icon. Let's click on Add. And now let's navigate to the location of where we extracted the Metasploitable 2 zip folder contents. Within this folder, you will see this single file. Simply click it and click on Open. Now select the file itself and click Choose. And the last step, it is to click Create. Once it's created, you will see the new virtual machine appearing on your VirtualBox Manager. Let's click on Settings. And here we can change the name if you want, but let's click on Network. And let's change the network settings to host only and let us use Virtual Adapter 1. Click on Advanced and set the interface promiscuous mode to allow all or at least to allow VMs. This will ensure Kali Linux is able to, let's say, perform various types of attacks on this virtual machine. And lastly, let's click on OK to save, and we will repeat this process for Kali Linux. Therefore, once we set the virtual adapters to host only and use the same virtual adapters between Kali Linux and Metasploitable 2, we'll create a virtually isolated network between these two systems. So now let's power on both virtual machines. I will power on Metasploitable 2 first, and this should take a few seconds to boot up. Once it's booted, you can simply log on with the default username as msfadmin and the password as msfadmin as well. Let's use the ipaddr command to get the IP address of Metasploitable 2. And now that we have the IP address, let's power on Kali Linux and ensure Kali Linux has end-to-end connectivity with Metasploitable 2. By the way, the default username for Kali is Kali, and the password is also Kali. As you can see, Kali Linux is on the same network, but let's do a ping. And we are able to ping from Kali to Metasploitable 2. This means we have end-to-end network connectivity between our attacker system, which is Kali Linux, and Metasploitable 2. To shut down Metasploitable 2, we can use a sudo halt command. And now let's turn off Kali Linux as well. You have learned how to set up Kali Linux as a virtual machine. You have also learned how to set up Metasploitable 2 as our target machine. And you have learned how to create a virtual network between these two systems for practicing. In the next video, we'll take a look at understanding how network security affects a business. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to the deep dive into network assessments by AC Console. This is Section 1, Introduction to Network Security Assessments. In this video, we'll take a look at understanding how network security affects a business. So let's dive on in. One of the key terminologies that we need to understand is what is a vulnerability. To put simply, a vulnerability is simply a security weakness within a system. This security vulnerability can be found within software, such as, let's say, bugs. It can also be weak passwords on systems, such as persons are not using complex passwords, or they can be using default passwords. Additionally, these can be device misconfigurations. Another key terminology is understanding what is an exploit. To put simply, an exploit is anything that has the potential to actually take advantage of a vulnerability. Remember, a vulnerability is a security weakness. So, using an exploit will simply take advantage of that security weakness or flaw in the target system. Usually, hackers often scan their targets, and the purpose of why they scan these targets is to look for any sort of weaknesses, which is vulnerabilities which they can exploit. The thing is, cybersecurity professionals also seek and try to discover the vulnerabilities within the organization before a hacker actually finds that security weakness and exploit it. The thing about using exploits is exploits can be a local exploit, which has to be placed on the target system and be executed locally, or it can be a remote exploit, which means to say the threat actor, such as a hacker, can simply launch an exploit from across the network. And let's say the threat actor is sitting down in one location across the internet, and he or she is attacking, let's say, vulnerable web server, which is in a data center. Another key terminology is understanding what is a threat. A threat, to put simply, is anything that has the potential to cause harm or damage to a system. A threat is anything that has the potential to violate the components of the CIA triad, which we'll take a look later down during this video. So a simple example is a threat actor has the potential to actually cause some type of harm or damage to a system and affect data loss. Threat actors are usually hackers, insider threats, or any person that wants to cause some type of data loss. These threat actors uses various attack methods and techniques which are used to take advantage. In other words, they are used to exploit a vulnerability within a system. So there are many tools within the cybersecurity industry which both hackers and even cybersecurity professionals use to actually test to see whether a system is vulnerable to a specific exploit. So why the need for network security? Each day there's so many cyber threats and attacks that is occurring. There's so many different viruses such as ransomware, viruses, malware, even Trojan. And the thing about it is we need a lot of network security solutions together with professionals to help defend an organization asset. So within the field of network security, within cybersecurity, and within information security, the main goal is to protect an organization assets from any sort of threat actors. Threat actors are the bad people that want to cause some type of damage or even steal your data and sell it. So assets are simply anything that is of value to an organization. These assets can be devices such as your routers, your firewall, even your servers that stores your data. These assets can be intellectual property and even the users on your network, such as your employees. To keep in mind, threat actors focuses on compromising. Remember we mentioned the CIA triad. C is for confidentiality, I for integrity, and A for availability. So threat actors, no matter what type of attack that they try to perform or even become successful in performing it, the main goal is to simply compromise confidentiality, integrity, and or the availability of their target system. So the principles of security is built upon the CIA triad, which is protecting confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So what exactly is confidentiality? Confidentiality simply ensures that data is kept private and is only accessible by an authorized person or user. A user system can simply protect data by using various types of data encryption algorithm. Therefore, if you encrypt a piece of data, such as a message, using a security key, anyone who gets that message will not be able to read the message because it is encrypted. If you share the key with an authorized person, then the authorized person can use the key to decrypt the data itself. The thing about being in cybersecurity is you need to know the different states of data. There are three main states of data. There's data in motion, which is data that is moving between a system. This data can be moving between systems across a network, or a user transporting the data in, let's say, for example, a storage device such as a hard drive, or even an USB device. There's also data at rest. Data at rest is data that is currently not being used, which is currently on your system at the moment. And then there's data in use. Data in use is data that is currently being accessed by, let's say, an application or a user. To put simply, we need to protect data in motion. A simple example of protecting data in motion is using a virtual private network, a VPN, which will simply establish a secure tunnel across an unsecure network, therefore keeping the data that's being transported across the tunnel encrypted and prevent anyone from intercepting and even gaining a copy of that data. Data at rest is the data on your hard drive. So how can we protect data that is at rest? We can simply perform data encryption. So you can use various encryption tools, such as, let's say you have Windows, you can use BitLocker, which allows you to create an encrypted container and you can place data in that encrypted container and lock it. If you use Linux, you can use locks, which will do pretty much the same. It will create an encrypted space on your hard drive. However, how do we protect data in use? Data in use is at its most vulnerable state because it is currently being used by an application. To protect data in use, it's very important that the application that is currently accessing the data does not contain any sort of security vulnerabilities or flaws in its design. The second component of the CIA triad is integrity. Integrity simply helps us to determine whether a message was modified between the source and the destination. We can use hashing algorithms, which are used to create what we call a one-way digest of the message, and this is known as a hash value. The digest is simply a cryptographic hash, which is a mathematical calculation which is used to represent the message. Each unique file or each unique message will create a unique hash value. Availability simply ensures a resource is available for those who require access to the resource. To put simply, availability is measured in uptime. This is how long the resource is available annually. The goal of maintaining availability is to ensure that there is very least downtime of a system, a network, or a resource. So now the big question, how does network security affect a business? So let's take a look at this diagram. This is the CIA triad. An organization tries to maintain a balance between these three components. If a system, a network, or even a device or anything within an organization is compromised, the threat actor focuses on affecting or compromising at least one of these components. If confidentiality is affected, the threat actor will be able to access data he or she is not authorized to see. If the integrity of a system is compromised, the threat actor can simply modify the data, causing users to be affected. And thirdly, availability. If availability is affected, a resource such as a website or a web server will not be available to the legitimate and authorized users. So we need to implement network security solutions. And these solutions could be software, it could be security appliances, and we also need to have the right staff and security professional to help maintain and discover any sort of security flaws within our organization and resolve these flaws as quickly as possible. In this video, we took a look at discovering the principles of network security and have gained the understanding and know the need of network security within an organization. In the next video, we will take a look at exploring network services and ports. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to the deep dive into network assessments by AC Council. This is Section 1, Introduction to Network Security Assessments. In this video, we'll take a look at exploring various network services and their associated port number. So let's dive on in. On a network, there are many network protocols, and these network protocols are simply the underlying technology which defines how a source, such as a sender device, can package and format a message to be sent across a network to the intended destination or the recipient. Network protocols are simply what we can call the rules which describes how devices will format and address information, similarly to sending a letter via your local postal service. For each network protocol, there's usually an associated logic network port number, or a logical port number. Some persons might call this a service port number as well. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is a port number? A port number is simply a doorway which is used to allow either outbound or even inbound traffic to and from a system. On devices that contains TCP/IP, has a total of 65,535 ports. These ports are categorized into three categories. Ports that range from, let's say, 1 to 1023 are what we call the well-known ports. An example of a well-known port is HTTP, which uses port 80. Ports 1024 to 49,151 are what we define as registered ports. And ports which range from 49,152 to 65,535, ports which range from 49,152 to 65,535 are what we call dynamic or even private ports. These ports are open temporarily to send data and receive data on a system. So let's take a look at this diagram. On one side we have a client, and the other side we have a web server. Since that server is running, let's say, some type of web application, and if it is using HTTPS, then port 443 will be open. So when the client opens the web browser on the client PC, it will connect to that destination port, which is 443. A common network protocol is known as Secure Shell, or better known as SSH. SSH is a secure network protocol which provides data encryption. It simply allows a user to securely access a remote system across the network, and SSH uses port 22 by default. Another common network protocol is known as Telnet. Telnet, it's a little bit like SSH. However, Telnet is an unsecure protocol, which means it does not provide any sort of data encryption. Telnet simply allows a user to access a remote system across the network, but remember, the connection is not secure, which means to say a threat actor can simply intercept your data and see your messages which are going across the network. Keep in mind, Telnet uses port 23 by default. Another common network protocol is the Domain Name System Protocol, or better known as DNS. DNS simply allows a device to resolve a hostname to an IP address, and DNS servers operate on port 53 by default. So imagine that you want to visit a website, you will need to know the IP address of the website. However, if you know the hostname, your system can use the hostname and attempt to resolve what the actual IP address is for the destination web server. Hence it is, DNS is very popular within the internet and even on private and internal networks. So the DNS server, it contains many records, and these records help system identify hostname to IP address and vice versa. In this diagram, we can see a user who's at the PC who wants to visit, let's say, www.cisco.com, but does not know the IP address. The PC will send a DNS query to the DNS server. The DNS server will check its record to determine the IP address for www.cisco.com and return it back to the PC. When the PC receives the response from the DNS server, it will then connect to the IP address as shown in the diagram. The File Transfer Protocol, FTP, is pretty much what the name says. It's a network protocol which allows file transfers between a device which has an FTP client and a device which runs an FTP server. The thing about FTP is it does not provide any sort of data encryption, so any data which is exchanged between the FTP server and the client is actually unencrypted. When using FTP, FTP operates on two ports. One port, which is port 20, is used for data transfers, while port 21 is used for control between the client and the server. In this diagram, we can see the FTP client and the FTP server. The client will send control instructions to the server requesting certain files, while the file transfer itself takes place over another port. A more secure version of FTP is known as SFTP, or better known as SSH, File Transfer Protocol. With SFTP, the client simply establishes an SSH session between the client and the FTP server. When using SFTP, it simply allows all the FTP messages to be sent across the SSH tunnel between devices. So in other words, we are using SSH to actually encrypt our FTP traffic. And because it is using SSH, the server operates on port 22 by default. As shown in the diagram, there's an FTP client on the PC, and there's an FTP server running on the other device. However, the connection is being sent across an SSH tunnel, and there's port 22 open on the FTP server. There's another version of FTP, and this one is known as FTPS, or better known as File Transfer Protocol Secure. When using FTPS, this version uses Secure Sockets Layer, SSL, to provide data encryption for the FTP messages as they exchange between a client and the server. As shown in the diagram, we have the two devices, an FTP client and an FTP server. However, since FTPS uses SSL, then port 443 will be open on the server device. And lastly, we even have one more variation of FTP. This one is known as Trivial File Transfer Protocol, and TFTP operates on port 69. The thing about using TFTP, it is commonly used within the networking industry and even systems administrators. They use TFTP to actually quickly upload and download files between their PCs, or let's say their laptops, and networking devices. These files could be configuration files or even device operating systems. As shown in the diagram, there's a TFTP client and a TFTP server. Remember, the TFTP server could be any device, and as long as it's running a TFTP server, it will have port 69 open by default. we can't forget about email protocols. There's three main email protocols. There's SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, which is used for sending outbound emails between systems. And email servers has a default port of port 25. However, if you want to retrieve emails, there's POP3, better known as Post Office Protocol 3, and POP3 simply operates on port 110, and this is used to download the emails from the email server onto the email client. However, if you want to synchronize the emails between an email client and the email server, then you should use IMAP4, which is Internet Message Access Protocol 4. And using IMAP4, it operates on port 143 by default. As shown in this diagram, we have multiple systems which are sending emails and retrieving emails. Once you are sending emails, SMTP is a protocol that is used for sending outbound emails. However, if you want to synchronize your email between the email server and, let's say, an email client, then you need to use IMAP4. But if you want to download the emails from the server onto the client, then you should use POP3. A very common network protocol is known as a Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, better known as DHCP. This is a network protocol which allows a DHCP server to automatically distribute IP addresses to client devices which are associated to it. This can be on wired or even wireless networks. When using DHCP, it uses two ports. The DHCP client will use port 68, while the DHCP server uses port 67 by default. In this diagram, we can see the DHCP four-way handshake, which takes place between a client and a DHCP server. This occurs whenever a client connects to a network for the first time. It will send a discover, the server will respond with an offer, the client will then respond with a request, and the DHCP server will finally send an acknowledgement back to the client. There's also HTTP and HTTPS. HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is simply an unsecure protocol which allows, let's say, a web browser to communicate with a web application or a web server. When using HTTP, the default port is port 80, while HTTPS provides data encryption because it uses SSL, and nowadays it uses the transport layer security. When using HTTPS, the web application server will use port 443 by default. Having completed this video, you have discovered common network protocols and their services. You have also learned the role and function of various network services. In the next video, we'll take a look at exploring network enumeration and scanning techniques. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to the deep dive into network assessments by AC Council. This is Section 1, Introduction to Network Security Assessments. In this video, we'll take a look at exploring network enumeration and scanning techniques. So let's dive on in. So what exactly is scanning? To put simply, we use scanning to discover live hosts or live devices on a network. It simply allows cybersecurity professionals, network security professionals, and even IT administrators to identify any sort of open service ports on a host system or a client device. Scanning also helps us identify any running services and even profile the target operating system. Some scanning techniques are also used within the network security industry by professionals to identify security weaknesses such as vulnerabilities on a system within a network. Using scanning can be beneficial to an organization, such as detecting any rogue devices and even profiling systems. A subset of scanning is known as enumeration. Enumeration simply allows a cybersecurity professional to gather, let's say, the usernames and even the user groups from a target system. IT professionals within the industry can use enumeration techniques to easily discover network shares which are, let's say, accessible by any unauthorized users on the network. And this is a really bad thing. simply because you don't want any sort of malicious users or threat actors to gain access to your file shares. Furthermore, enumeration can help IT professionals to retrieve this running services, routing table, running applications, and even gather the banner information from these services. Now that you understand the concepts of scanning and enumeration, let's dive into some practical exercises. In this exercise, we'll be using Kali Linux as our attacker system, and we'll be using Metasploitable 2 as our victim system. Now let's open the terminal, and let's use the IPADDR command to identify our network address. So now that we know the network that we're connected to, which is a 192.168.241, and our IP is .20, so the network ID will be 192.168.241.0. Next, let's use the net discover command together with -r with a network ID to identify any sort of, let's say, devices which are connected to our network. This process usually takes a minute or two to complete because this tool simply listens for any sort of address resolution protocol packets or messages, which is ARP messages, that are traversing the network and identify their IP addresses. As you can see, it has identified two systems on the network. There's a .2 and a .19. We also get their MAC addresses and their vendor identification. Next, we can use nmap and we can use a -sn switch to actually do a ping on the network. So to put simply, -sn will simply allow nmap to actually do a ping sweep on the network. So nmap is going to send a ping to all systems on the network and actually record the systems which respond. So here we can see we have .19 and .20 as well. Remember, .20 is our Kali Linux machine, and .19 seems to be our target, which is Metasploitable 2. Next, let's use nmap, and let's specify the target IP address of Metasploitable 2. This will simply allow us to see all the open ports, their states, and their services. The thing about using nmap as it is to scan, let's say, a network or even, let's say, a single IP address, it scans the top 1000 ports on the target itself. So therefore, it does not scan the entire range of network ports, such as 65,535 ports. It simply scans the top 1000 ports. That's something to always remember. Next, let's use nmap-a to perform an aggressive scan, and using -a will simply allow us to identify the operating system. It will do service enumeration. It will also perform basic script scanning to identify, again, the operating system using various default SMB scripts. We will use -t4 to perform a very fast scan, but not too aggressive or not too noisy. And we'll specify, let's say, -p- to actually scan all the ports. So pretty much what -a, -t4, and -p- will do, it is going to perform an aggressive scan very quickly and scan all the 65,535 ports on this .19 system. So now the scan is finished. Let's take a look at the results. Let's start from the top. We can see port 21 is open, as we knew already, and this is running FTP. But take a look as we can get a service version, which is VSFTPD 2.3.4. We can use this information to even search for vulnerabilities about this service version using Google. We can also see the FTP server status, and nmap was able to perform some type of connectivity to the nmap service. We see SSH is open. together with the service version, which is OpenSSH 4.7p1 on a Debian or a Ubuntu system, and it is running Protocol 2.0. Furthermore, we can see additional services running such as SMTP. We can see the banner it was able to retrieve. Going on further, we are able to actually enumerate the operating system. So here we can see it is running a type of Linux, or at least a flavor of Linux that is. So we know definitely by profiling the operating system here, we are able to, let's say for example, if you're looking for exploits, we know we need to either develop or look for an exploit that is used to target a Linux-based operating system. Furthermore, the default SMB scripts are able to identify the SMB version together with the operating system and the hostname. To get more information on how to use nmap, we can use a man space nmap command, and this will provide us the manual page for nmap. As you can see, there are different switches, and you are able to get a description of how to use these switches and their rules and function. Furthermore, you can use a nmap space -- help command as well to actually get the same type of information, but more so on how to actually use the tool to perform your various scanning techniques. Now, let us move on to using Metasploit to actually perform enumeration. To get started, on a terminal, simply type msf console and hit enter. Since in our nmap scan, we were able to identify a version of SMBs running, to filter any Metasploit modules, that will help us to identify the actual version of SMB. So you can do search SMB_version and hit enter. And as we can see, it returned the auxiliary scanner SMB_version module. And this module, as the description says, is to simply identify or profile a version of SMB on the target system. Now we can use the use command together with the name of the module and hit enter. Next, let's type options to see what options or parameters are needed. And here we can see we require the R host. The R host is simply the target system. So now we'll need to set the R host value. We can use the set R host command together with the target IP address. And this is the IP address of our Metasploitable 2 system. Once we set it, we can use the options command once more to actually determine whether the value is set. And here we can see the value is set. To launch an auxiliary module, you can simply use a run command or the exploit command, but we are going to use just a run command. As you can see, the module ran. It was able to detect SMB version 1 on the target system, and it gives us a little bit of information about the host itself. So it is saying the host could not identify, but it seems to be a Unix-based system. Next, we can use a tool such as SMB map to actually identify if there's any files or shares on the target system. For this tool, we are going to use SMB map-h followed by the IP address of the target and hit enter. Here we can see a list of available shares, their permissions, and any sort of comments. If you look closely here, you can see that there's a temp folder TMP and the permissions are read and write. This means to say we can read the data from this share and even write data to the share. However, the other shares are not accessible. To read the data within the temp share, we can use the smb-h command followed by the target IP, then -r and the name of the target folder. And notice we are able to read the contents of this folder. In this video, we took a look at discovering host systems on a network using Nmap, and we also took a look at using Metasploit to perform enumeration on network services. In the next video, we'll take a look at identifying vulnerabilities on a network and assets. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one. Hi, and welcome to the deep dive into network assessments by AC Console. This is Section 1, Introduction to Network Security Assessments. In this video, we'll take a look at identifying vulnerabilities on a network and assets. So let's dive on in. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is a vulnerability? To put simply, a vulnerability is a security weakness or flaw in a system which a threat actor, such as a hacker, can compromise by using an exploit. There are various types of security weaknesses on a system, and these can be, let's say for example, default settings. Systems which contain default settings are simply deployed on, let's say, a network with the same configurations as they have since they have left their manufacturer. These default settings can be very easily accessed by anyone, so hence this is recommended that once you buy a new device, you should configure it and remove any sort of default configurations that may pose a weakness on your network. Additionally, another security weakness is using weak encryption. These are systems which use insecure encryption technologies which a threat actor can simply exploit and can gain unauthorized access to that system itself. Thirdly, there is the use of unsecure protocols. Unsecure protocols are simply network protocols and applications which does not provide any sort of security features such as encryption and any other security technologies that is used to ensure the privacy between a client such as a computer and a server. There's also the use of open permissions. These are full permissions which are given to anyone, which can lead to a security risk from users on the network. This means to say anyone can make any sort of modifications on the files and, let's say, the folders. The use of unsecure root accounts is also a major security vulnerability. These are root accounts on, let's say, a Linux-based system, which does not contain any sort of complex passwords and that they are very easy to compromise. Open ports and services can also pose a security risk. There are many unnecessary services running on a system. Some of these services may open a network port to allow inbound connections from, let's say, a remote system. A threat actor can launch a remote exploit across a network to take advantage of the vulnerable services on a target system. There are also security vulnerabilities that we need to consider whether we are using a cloud-based system or an on-premise system. Vulnerabilities on the cloud is simply having insecure applications, services, and even virtual machines on the cloud, and these systems are vulnerable to anyone. Vulnerabilities within, let's say, an on-premise solution are simply security weaknesses which exist on systems that are within the organization. To put simply, we need to secure all our applications, systems, and virtual machines, whether these systems are on the cloud or whether these systems are on our existing network. There's also vulnerabilities that exist in third-party, and these are what we call third-party risks. When a security risk exists, an organization may seek to transfer the risk handling to, let's say, another organization, or in this case, a third party. The third party is usually a trusted provider who have the experience in handling these type of security risks. However, third parties can lack vendor support. This means to say if there's an issue with a product from, let's say, vendor, the vendor may not provide adequate support to the customer. And this may inform the customer that there's something wrong on the customer's end and not the actual device. There's also risk in data storage. It's important to know where your data is being stored. Data can be lost or leaked by a third-party vendor. Data can be stolen while being stored on the third party's infrastructure. There are many issues when managing third-party vendors. There can be security concerns which is the vendor has certified professionals to work on the equipment they support? Does a vendor have a privacy policy for customer data? Does a vendor meet certain compliance and regulatory standards? An organization should ensure a vendor is properly screened and meet all requirements before conducting any sort of business with the vendor itself. There's also risk involved with system integration. Sometimes an organization may have to integrate, let's say, their system with a third-party system. Please ensure the third-party system or systems are very well trusted and is secure. There's also risk involved in supply chain. The third-party vendor may be vulnerable or be a victim of a supply chain attack and have not realized it. There's security concerns if the third party is not acquiring their hardware and their software components from other suppliers than the trusted retailer. There's a major risk when outsourcing code development. When a third party is developing code or an application, there are security concerns such as compliance, secure coding techniques as well. There's also improper and weak patch management. There are security vulnerabilities within an organization that does not have proper patch management policies in effect. This means managing their firmware, operating systems, and even applications within the organization. Furthermore, there's zero-day, which is a really bad vulnerability. To put simply, software vendors typically test their applications for security weaknesses before publishing their products to the customers. Sometimes an attacker is able to find a security vulnerability within an application after it has been published, but before the software vendor is aware of the vulnerability. The attacker can simply take advantage of this vulnerability to compromise the application, and this is what we call a zero-day. Now that you have an understanding of the concepts of vulnerability and vulnerability management, let's take a look at working with Nessus. Nessus is a very popular vulnerability scanner within the cybersecurity industry. To get started, we'll be installing Nessus inside of our Kali Linux virtual machine. So head over to your web browser and let us search for Nessus. We'll click the Tenable link, and as you can see, there's a professional version of Nessus which is used for commercial and of course professional use. But for us to learn about Nessus, we can use the Nessus Essentials, which allows us to scan up to 16 IPs for free. So simply scroll down and click on download. Once you click on download, please complete this form because you need to register for an activation code. The code will be sent to you via email. Next, you will be guided to this page which says, "Thank you for registering for Nessus. Please click here to download Nessus." Simply click the download button and you will now be redirected to this download page. Simply scroll down and download the version of Nessus for Kali Linux. Now Nessus is saved, let's head over to our downloads directory within Kali Linux, and here we can see the Nessus installer file. You can simply open a terminal from right here. So you can right click and open a command prompt. And now let's actually install Nessus. So we can use the dpkg tool to get our -i and the name of the file. Next, let's copy this command, which is /bin/systemctl start nessus d.service, enter it in our terminal, and hit enter. This is to simply ensure the Nessus scanning service is actually enabled. Next, let's copy this URL, open our web browser, and enter it. Simply accept the security risk and continue. And now we are on the Nessus initialization page. Simply select Nessus Essentials and click Continue. This page requires you to request a code, but we've already done that, so let's click Skip. Simply copy the code, which is the activation code from your email account, which is sent to you by Tenable, paste it here and click Continue. Next, you will be required to create a user account. Please ensure that you remember this user account details because this is what you will need to log into the Nessus web interface. And now the initialization process is actually going to start and it's going to download some plugins and some updates. This process usually takes a few minutes to complete, so please be patient. Now the process is complete. Ensure that you log into Nessus and let's click on Close here. To begin a scan, let's click on New Scan. And here we have pre-built templates. Simply click on Basic Scan or Advanced Scan, but we are going to click on Basic Scan. We can set a name, a description, and our target. Our target will be that of Metasploitable 2. So let's complete the information. And to begin the scan, let's click this drop down next to Save and we'll see Launch. So now the scan is running. This should take a couple of minutes to complete. Let's give it some time. Once the scan is complete, simply click on the scan itself to view the results. And here we can see a list of vulnerabilities and we can see the total vulnerabilities based on, let's say, the severity rating. To generate a report, let's click on Report and click on PDF. Here we can generate an executive report and a custom report. Simply click on Custom, and here you can see the different options that you can have inserted within the report. Next, let's change this to executive. So we will generate an executive report and click Generate Report. And now the PDF file is ready. And now we can open the report and we can see an overall summary of all the vulnerabilities that is discovered using Nessus on our target. The custom report allows you to create a more technical report that is required by a penetration tester or a member of technical staff. In this video, we took a look at discovering the various types of security vulnerabilities which exist within an organization. We have also learned how to install, set up, and perform a vulnerability assessment using Nessus. In the next video, we'll take a look at the learning objectives for Section 2. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I will see you in the next one.
Did you know that you can be part of the lucrative cybersecurity industry? Even top companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, Facebook, and Dell all hire cybersecurity professionals. The cybersecurity industry has a 0% unemployment rate. The average salary for an entry-level cybersecurity job is about $100,000 per year in the United States. Furthermore, you don't need to know coding and learn from your home, and you get a scholarship to kickstart your career. Apply now. EC Council is pledging a $3.5 million CCT scholarship for cybersecurity career starters. Scan the QR code on the screen to apply for the scholarship. Fill out the form